Myself, Trustee Bennion, Trustee Baker, and Trustee Schwartz. Joining us also, we have our Superintendent, Dr. Holmes, and our Board Clerk, Ms. Cotton. And first of all, item number 2, any additions, corrections, modifications, or substitutions to the current agenda. And I'm going to propose one. I failed to inform our Board Clerk to put a section for public comment on. So I would like to add a location underneath the Blaine County School District Policy 602.12, a section for public comment. And then also due to timing, I do not believe that we're going to be able to get to our item number 5, our closed executive session afterwards. So I propose that we also delete that off the agenda at this time also. Do I hear, is there any other additions, modifications, or substitutions to the agenda?
I have received none.
No. Okay. Do I hear a motion to accept the proposed modifications to the agenda? I move that.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries and agenda amended. So the way we're going to set up this meeting, like I said, there are some time constraints for the board at this meeting, and I do not foresee us taking action on either issue at this meeting, but action will be, they will both be on the agenda during the May meeting if action needs to be taken. So with that, well, I am proposing as a board that we give 15 minutes to the Adolescent Substance Abuse Prevention and Intervention Program. 50 minutes. So we'll end that at 7 o'clock, and we'll have a 15-minute time slot for our district policy 602.12, and then we'll have about 15 minutes of public comment before Trustee Clayton has to take off, and if those of us that remain can listen to the remainder of the public comment. So with that, and to give each of the board members fair opportunity to kind of ask questions, I'm going to rotate through, and after each board member asks a question, I try and ask if they hold off on their second question until everyone has asked one, and then kind of rotate through, giving everybody fair opportunity to ask questions, get their points across. So with that, I will turn the meeting over to Dr. Holmes.
I just have a clarification question. With the ASAP program, are we going to be given a presentation, and then are there going to be other workshops that are more informal where people from the audience can ask a question at times other than public comment?
At this meeting, so it can be properly on the record with our form, as the public comment and questions be done in the public comment section of the meeting, and give it time for the board to be able to digest and find out and have answers to our questions.
Okay.
How many requests for public comment do we have?
As of right now, we have 10, and there are, that's included, there's 10, and there possibly could be more joining.
Okay, so will we be having the ASAP presentation and then public comments?
ASAP presentation.
Public comment
board,
and then...
ASAP presentation.
Thank you.
Board
All you
will
need to
ask
do.
questions, board discussion on District Policy 602, and then public comment at the end.
Okay.
Because I public comment here for the District Policy 602.
Right, I'm just wondering if we want to separate those public comments into the ASAP public comment and the 602.12 public comment.
thought about doing that, because if we do that, then Rob will be here for the discussion on the 602.12.
I gotta be back to work by 7:30.
That way the board can have our discussion, and then we can take any public comment, and this meeting is being recorded, so that Rob can go back and take a look at the public comments.
Okay? Thank you.
All right. Dr.
Okay,
Holmes.
I'm going to take a real quick spin at revisiting the ASAP proposal because there's been some confusion about from the time of discussion to the time of actual proposal and what it is, so just to make sure that we are all together on it. And I just want to start off with why in the world are we here anyway? And multiple reasons. I think one of the reasons was on January 20th in your board meeting, I was given the directive to develop something around how do we better serve our students who are being expelled from school or suspended from school or both due to substance abuse issues. And we had already begun some work in a separate committee to work on that, so that rolled into something now that the board was directly interested in. Of the fact that we know that of our non-graduates last year, 20 of the 32 have or had substance abuse issues. So while it might not be the only contributing factor, it is huge. And that is our purview as educators, is to ensure our students graduate from high school successful and ready for life. Our school climate surveys, we've talked about this again, that we do, and the incredible number of parents who indicate that there is a drug use problem in our schools or with our teens in the community. The number of school suspensions and expulsions that we are having, and then a teen culture at our high school, at Wood River High School, that celebrates substance abuse. And I'm not saying that every student does, but it is very much a part of the culture, and the students who do not are the quiet ones, the ones who don't feel like they have protection to come forward and say that this is not acceptable in our school, and we're not going to tolerate this in our school. Even in working with the student union, Dan McGee has found out that there are some cultural pressures, just like there always are with teenagers. You've asked for suspension expulsion hearing data, and as you know, it took us quite a while to get this, and I'm still not going to swear to it, but because Ms. Graybo had to do a lot of reading, because there's two different ways you can enter data, and so she was trying to read the records and see what was really what type of thing. So I'm comfortable that we had at least these numbers, if not more. Just because I know right now how many expulsions have occurred this year, just being here and being a part of them. And I know our system right now indicates that there's only been one, and you all know that it's not accurate. So I'm a little suspicious about this data. But so far this year, we have had 7 expulsion hearings related to substance abuse, and we have had 25 offenses that were taken care of directly at the school with suspensions. Yeah.
Is it okay to ask questions in between?
Mm-hmm.
So, when you say 7 school offense involving substance abuse, and there's 25, do you mean 25 first?
25 that were taken care of at the school level, then another 7 that came on duty for hearings because it was their
So
second
25
offense.
first offenses?
I don't know if it was first offense. I just know there were 25 instances of substance abuse that were taken care of, handled at the school level, and then 7 more that came on because they were either distribution or separate time offenses.
So I guess I'm just a little confused because at the last school board meeting I had asked how many first offenses there were this year, and I think the response was 7 or 8.
That was,
I
yes,
guess I'm
that
a
was
little-
the off-the-cuff response, and in fact, when I shared this with the high school, they were a little surprised as well, and like I said, I'm not even sure this number is accurate, because there's 2 different, I don't want to get into the details of the technology, but there's 2 different portals through which you can enter the discipline data. Some has been entered in one place, some has been entered in another place.
Okay, and so 7, is that 7 to 8?
7 over 8 expulsion hearings that you have addressed so far this year have
7
dealt with
Oh, 7 of the 8 have been.
Have resulted in expulsion.
No.
They have
They
addressed brought to you because of substance.
We had 7
Okay.
hearings.
7 hearings, 8 were substance. 8 were substance.
All right.
Nelson has something to
Mr.
say.
Nelson.
I think we were under the impression that we were asked how many of the 25 resulted in expulsions. That's what we were trying to refer to, so that number is correct. I think that it's also important to note that substance abuse also deals with tobacco. It's all folded into the same policy.
It's alcohol, tobacco, and
Okay.
Drugs, alcohol, tobacco.
So the 7 expulsions would actually probably be counted in the 25.
no, those were handled at the school level.
Right, but if they came to this,
Then those were
if
handled
they were
at the board
expelled
level.
because of a second offense, they could have had a first offense at
They
the
could
school
have,
level.
or it could have been a first offense last year.
Yeah, okay.
There
So
was
some of those
an-
could be a double count,
There was an
technically.
incident today that will be coming to you that was very similar to that.
And one quick question, I mean, about how many are tobacco, do we know? Do we have the idea?
It doesn't break them out.
Just
That
because,
number.
a lot different.
All right.
You had one, okay.
I got one more question now.
Uh-huh.
Now I'm up to speed. The 7 of 8 were involving substance. Of those 8 expulsion hearings, how many resulted in expulsion?
Well.
Because I wasn't here for all of them.
You weren't here for all of them. I think, I'm trying to do a count off the top of my head. In some of them, when you gave them a behavior plan, that would not be listed as an expulsion, and even though they failed to comply with the behavior plan and had dropped out of school. So it would not be technically in the state called an expulsion. Instead, it's a dropout.
So would you say then that's
I'd
of the
say
7, 7
there's
are
only
not?
one I know that has come before you so far this year, but it's still being successful.
Out of those 7,
Yes,
6 failures.
yes. Okay, so then just a quick review of the prevention and intervention goals. This is a package. What we're talking about tonight is the intervention piece, but we are looking at this as we need to do both pieces, and as you are aware, there is a large committee that is working on a social emotional curriculum, and as you heard tonight from Daryl at the community partners meeting, the advocates are helping with this and going to be part of the units that are included in this social emotional curriculum. Then we also have progress measures that we want to be able to monitor going forward. Laura, the next slide,
Oh,
please.
sorry.
I'm trying to go as fast as I can so that they can have time for questions. Some progress measures for how we want to monitor this going forward. Referral to the program is any way possible. If you go to the next slide, please. It could be from your hearing table that they are referred to the program. It could be referred by the district's administration, the director of student services, parent or guardian. We had a parent in the office last Friday that was asking for something for their child, and at this point we have nothing to refer them to. Or it could even be the child self-referred. All right, so here's the part that I think is what everybody's trying to wrap their minds around, because there is two different criticisms. One, it's not structured enough, or two, it's too structured, it's too scripted. And so we're really trying to give people a mind movie of what it might be, but also say that we know every kid is individual and every kid is going to have an initial assessment by the therapist, and then we'll figure it out from there. But the whole premise of the program is based on accountability with nurturing, or the building back of trust. Like we've had conversations even when we've been dealing with students in front of you, the need of building back trust. And so the whole idea is that students will be working on learning how to make better and more positive choices and learning some social emotional skills. So in doing this, if you want to have an average or a middle of the road, or what's it basically going to look like for the average person, it would probably be about 2 weeks the initial time. It could be less depending on what the mental health therapist tells us, or it could be more. But let's just say 2 weeks, because what we want to happen is we want a relationship to be built with the therapist and with the teacher, and we want skills to be learned and practiced. It is not intended to be punitive. If it was intended to be punitive, we'd send them for 1 day, or 2 days, or whatever, and be done with it. It was intended to be a life-changing, to change the skills that these kids have for dealing with life. So they would first be assessed by the mental health therapist, then they would begin their program. This would be the day after they are caught either under the influence or in possession. There would be both group and individual counseling, depending on the severity or which group of kids they belong to. There are, as you'll see later on in the logistics, the space that we're proposing to use has 2 classrooms in it, so there is ability to separate kids if need be. What they would be working on during that time is substance abuse education, social emotional education. That's where we're talking about how do I make good choices, how do I practice these skills, how do I really drill in and work on this. And then also being able to continue their academic education, which they are not able to do if they're at school. Of course, the parent and family involvement piece, parents have to be involved at the intake and have to participate in at least 1 parent session in the evenings. There would be guest speakers, there would be challenge activities. Dan will speak to this a little bit and a little bit more in a little while, but because of the wanting to help these students identify positive ways or positive risks to take type of thing. We talked about before, jeans or khakis and a plain white shirt. They're earning back their privileges, and there would be a reentry or transition plan with long-term support or follow-up happening. Yes?
I don't know if you're going to cover this later, but you talk about the beginning being like a 2-week, more intensive. Then what? You talk about building a relationship.
Well, the 2 weeks is so that they can build the relationship with the therapist and with the teacher, and also be practicing their social emotional skills, making positive choices that they're learning in that 2-week time. Or it could be a week, or it could be 3 weeks, depending on what the assessment tells us that they are going to need. Then when they are put back into the regular class, it could be put back a class at a time. They could be put back in all classes at a time, depending on what the therapist thinks is appropriate. But there will be a reentry plan that scribes out for them how it's going to work. And the social worker or the counselor over at the high school will be working along with the mental health therapist to continue to do that follow-up with them as they reintegrate into the school.
So would they continue to have sessions with them in person?
They certainly could. If that's part of what the therapist thinks they need, they can still have counseling.
And when you talk about assessment by the therapist, are you recommending now that all students be assessed rather than have an option to not be assessed and just take it as
No,
positive?
the option that we provided to you was they either choose this plan or they choose suspension. Now, of course, if you modify your policy and suspension is no longer an option, then that's out. But right now, we're talking about if they choose this plan, if they go through.
So we're still giving them a choice to participate. It wouldn't be everybody gets assessed no matter
That's the
what.
recommendation that's on the table.
Okay.
Yeah. And if you guys want to modify it, you're perfect. All right. So then the logistics, we talked about this before, the 2 self-contained classrooms, lunch and breakfast room, therapist counseling office, transportation either by parents or by us. Of course, a bathroom so they don't have to be walking through the community campus, the teacher, and then the mental health therapist that will be shared with other mental health issues we have across the district.
And the ASAP teacher is just a regular classroom teacher?
Secondary certified teacher, yes. All right, let's see. Then with additional offenses comes the idea of the therapist telling us what they think is best for this child. They can be re-enrolled. They can have their individual plan revised as long as the report from the therapist and the administration is that the student is working the program. We understand that there's going to be trips along the way, but as long as they are working the program, they can continue in this loop. Or they could be referred to more intensive treatment or therapy, or if there is the sense that the child is not working the program or giving it a good go, then they could be brought to you for a hearing. So that is much different than what we do right now. And then just to say some of the things that we've considered but not included, because remember, Dan and his team, remember the first PowerPoint had an extensive amount of reading that they had done and research they had done, other groups they had talked to. They continue to do that. Dan and Sharma and some of the folks have reached out and they've had conversations with Mr. Parnes, they've had continued conversations with Dr. Thorson, they've had conversations with Dr. Meyer, who is at the University of Idaho and is the head of their addictive treatment program, where people can go and get certified in this kind of work. He's talked with Judge Mitchell, who is a mental health court judge. You know, they've continued to have lots of conversations with the Drug Coalition, St. Luke's, trying to make sure that we understand everybody's concerns and have thoroughly understood why they are recommending that. Saturday school or after school have been two options that have been put forward. The high school is where they are right now because they have tried that, and they continue to try that with very poor attendance. Kids are usually available shortly before school, but they do not show up on Saturday, and they do not stay around after school. Yes?
Regarding the poor attendance, was it mandatory participation in this?
Yes.
And they just didn't attend?
Yes.
And
Yeah,
what
it was
the-
there was a discipline measure, and they didn't attend.
What was the discipline measure for that?
Well, then the discipline measure for that was kind of how we ended up with the little room we have right now that has no program in it. We just stick you in there. So that's not a very successful place, so.
Was that after school, was that basically just a detention hall, or was there a program that occurred on Saturdays and after school?
There's a detention hall, right?
Yeah, on Saturday school?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like they were going to do group activity and do
No.
speakers and sessions?
We tried other interventions in the school setting with teachers, classrooms, lunchtime detentions. Still works, so the next ratchet up is Saturday school. If that doesn't work, then we put them in in-school suspension, which then they're missing even more school. And parents have been called, and so that's, yeah.
So would you say it's a fair assessment, apples to apples comparison, to say that a detention would be similar to running an actual program after school or during Saturdays? I mean, it seems like it's a very different requirement, whether
Yeah.
you sit in a room and do nothing versus participate in this kind of program to stay in school.
The high school is considering changing, as you're aware, they have 2 late starts a week right now.
Right.
For teachers to be able to collaborate. They are considering next year changing that to an early dismissal 1 day a week, because even getting kids to come for academic tutoring or that kind of help after school is just very miserable attendance. So even when it's a positive thing that is helpful, it's just not a time that they're available.
And just to follow up on your question,
Uh-huh.
our experience has been we've got more productivity and education out of our students in school. I mean, it sounds crazy that they're actually out of school, but in speaking with those kids, when they come back to class, they're more caught up doing in-school suspension than if we have them go to Saturday school. So I know that was one of the concerns is if we're moving kids in this program to in-school, they're missing their classroom directly, how will they get behind? We found from talking to a lot of kids that they actually come back caught up or close to because they're focused on getting it done with the support of a teacher.
So would there be a consideration if you're moving to an early dismissal once a week, you kind of sort of already have a captive audience if you were to run something in that time frame, that 1 day a week? So if Wednesdays is a 2 o'clock dismissal, that would be an opportunity to have some kind of in session during school hours?
We haven't
You haven't
discussed that
discussed that
yet,
at all?
yeah, because that other schedule hasn't been approved yet, or so.
Okay. Thank you.
You know, there might be a good solution, especially for the ongoing piece.
Yes.
Not for the upfront intense trying
No.
to change behavior right away, but yeah. There's been conversation about keeping the students in regular classes, and we are going to reach that someday. Right now, it is in knowing the culture of that high school. It is not providing that accountability with nurturing, which is really what we want to have happen. We don't want them to feel like they're being punished, but we want accountability with nurturing. We want them to work on earning trust and earning their way back. We've had conversations about restorative justice, and as you know, I'm familiar. I worked with it in other places, back in Baltimore and Virginia, and well, Baltimore needs it right now, don't they? You have to have a culture where it's okay for kids to stand up and say that's not tolerated here. And we are intent on getting that high school to that place where that can happen. Tomorrow night, if you come to the meet and greet to meet our candidate for principal at the high school, I think that's one of the strong attributes that he will bring to the school, is the ability to create a strong school culture among the students. But right now, we are not there. And as we talked about before, it's rather a celebration of substance abuse rather than a celebration of I'm choosing to live my life in a different way. So with that, I would like for Dan to just have a few quick comments, since he has been talking to lots of different people, especially Dr. Meyer at the University of Idaho and Judge Mitchell and some of those folks. So Dan, if you want to come up.
Thank you for the opportunity to address an issue in our community that we all want to help fix. And after our last board meeting, we needed to do more data, more research, and so we gathered additional research, met with partners in the community, contacted Dr. Stephen Meyer. He's the University of Idaho Director of Addiction Training Program. Figured I'd go out in the academic world some more. Spoke with him, shared our program, received some feedback, very positive. He then invited me to his keynote speech that he was doing at a conference, Addiction Treatment and Technology Conference, the future of it, up in Coeur d'Alene on Friday. So I drove up, listened to the presentation. It was amazing. It was great. There also, as part of the panel, was a Judge John Mitchell from Coeur d'Alene, and he's run a very successful mental health court for 11 years. And so in a break, I spoke with him for a few minutes. And then when I came home, I emailed him, or actually at the conference, I emailed him the presentation and then called and spoke with him a couple times this week. So I've gone out beyond our valley and also got some additional research. I know we've got many people that want to speak, but I just want to share quickly a few of the things that I learned on my 16-hour drive. And so this is how important it is to me, and I know it is to everyone in this room. So in speaking with Dr. Meyer, he did an outstanding job of his presentation, but a few of the quick points I want to bring up is that marijuana now has a lot more THC than the past. It used to be 2 to 4%, and now it's usually 18 to 30% THC. So the marijuana people are smoking now is a lot different than the 70s and the 80s. And so that's a critical thing. Marijuana and alcohol significantly impacts the brain's memory and learning. Okay, everybody knows that, but some people need to be reminded. There's a Gilman study in 2015 that he cited where people score 18% less on long-term memory tests 2 years after stopping their usage. So 18% less memory, which if we have students at lunch that are leaving and coming back and taking tests, or the ISAT or ACT tests, this definitely impacts learning, without a doubt. He also said we need to target interventions at 7th and 8th grade to prevent from starting as a 10th grader. And so one more piece of this puzzle is we need to go in, and that's the beauty of our program. It's 6-12. We can use a therapist to go into the middle school to help provide that education. If we can limit a student using it by 10th grade, the chances statistically of using marijuana is significantly reduced at that point. And so we need to start earlier. He liked in our program, especially, that we have positive decision-making in small groups, peer-to-peer, and individually. He loved that part of our program. He was not concerned in the least that students would be out of their traditional classroom and getting academic support and counseling within the group. He had that. It's not a problem. He said, that's what he has learned. He said we need to, and we all know this, car insurance at 25 drops, and there's a reason why that is. Because there's something called the go in us when we're under 25 that allows you to get up to that cornice. He was an old ski patrol. He said under 25 I'd be up at the cornice with the sled and I could go down, make my turns, but after I turn 25, you go, oh, I'm going to go around. That same is in all of our brains, that at 25 we have the go, no-go mentality. And so kids, they make decisions not on the knowledge or what's right, they're making it on emotions. And he said it's important that our program, which it does have with the challenge courses and the activities we have built in, builds on that. And so that's another beautiful part of this. It's not just a scared straight, we're going to kick you to the curb, you know. So he really liked that part. And he said, especially males, they need positive, high stimulation activities that are positive risk-taking activities. And I was at the community partners for a little bit today, and we have so many community partners out there, we could team up our kids in these programs with that too. I gotta hurry. I know there's people here that want to speak, but you can see how fired up I am on, I got my coaching in me going right now. In talking with Coach Judge Mitchell from Coeur d'Alene, spoke with him, and he was so nice. He went above and beyond to spend time with me and on the phone too. He believes in tough love and nurturing. He said we need to provide 4 positive incentives for every negative incentive we give people in substance abuse. And that's another thing about our program. We're giving multiple positive incentives when they're in it. It's important to hold substance abuse offenders accountable. There needs to be accountability. And he said long-term, consistent follow-up is critical, which is another piece of our program. 30, 60, 90 days, where this counselor can follow up with these students. Possibly even using that Wednesday early out to check in with them, or advisory period that we've talked about. Judge Mitchell was also impressed about our entire program for ASAP. He said, he asked me, he said, I would love to share this with the Coeur d'Alene School District, can I? And I said, absolutely, share it. And so this program, which is from Virginia Beach, and we've done, our team has been amazing, a lot of research. It's not a 90s program that was brought out. It's our program. It's not the Virginia Beach model. We've modified it to fit best practices and done research. And I know everyone is here that will be speaking believes in what they're believing. But I just want to say that we've done additional research in the last week or two that have validated our program. I've got more notes and more statistics that I'd love to share with you at some point if you want. I also talked with Eric, I think it's Keel or Kyle, he's director, the district manager of the Idaho Department of Corrections of Coeur d'Alene. He also said accountability is critical in helping people with substance abuse. And I'd like to conclude by asking 3 questions. I've been asked a lot of questions. I want to ask you guys 3 questions. Okay? The first 2, I'm an old government teacher, and I'm going to steal from John F. Kennedy's famous quote. If not us, who? If not now, when? But I'm going to add a 3rd question, and I'm going to bring this up to all of us. If not this program, what program? And I think the longer we wait, another kid is impacted, another family is impacted, and we need to step and make a big leap and try to keep addressing this program. And I know there's more data that's coming up. I met with Michael David and just got a simple statistic. I'd like to leave you with this. Last year, our seniors, they do an annual survey. 40% of our seniors, when they took the survey, 40% said they had smoked marijuana in the last 30 days. The average is 13 to 17%. So we do have an issue. We know it. We're trying to address it. And I appreciate you for the courage you're taking in listening to our presentation. Thank you.
Do you have follow-up questions on his remarks?
Yes, specifically about what Dan said. You talk about go, no go, and that 25-year mark.
Right.
You talk about the therapist doing some education at the middle school level.
Right.
And then you talk about emotional and positive corrections and connections. how is the educational element that this therapist would provide at the middle school going to be extremely effective as opposed to, I mean, we've heard restorative justice, and I'm talking about making peer accountability and improving peer connections. You know, how would that look exactly as far as really addressing where you are influencing them at that age?
So what I would foresee is we would hire the therapists who would be finding all the most recent research, contacting Dr. Meyer or others, and then finding the best practices that work for the middle school age students. You know, we've heard of all these types of programs that work and don't work, but we would need to do some more research and find out exactly what those programs would look like.
If I could just add on, there is a subcommittee working on Goal 4, which is empowering our students to make positive choices. And Mr. Paz and Ms. Gutnick and Ms. Baer, there's a lot of people in this group that are on that subcommittee. And I know one of the things they have already honed in on is, in their research, is and I don't even know what the program is, but I know you were talking about a program for 7th and 8th grade that has shown a lot of effectiveness in as a prevention program. So that committee is also working on that as we go in the long term.
Because it seems like that would be really essential to developing that at the earlier ages, or even going down younger, to talk about making these connections. So it's peer accountability and changing the culture. Because this addresses kind of after the kids have already gone there.
Right.
And you're trying to bring them back. So how do we keep them from going there? And I think that that's something that maybe could be fleshed out more. I don't know that it's the therapist that would be doing it, or a collaboration committee.
Right. So it's part of social emotional education that we're building too, obviously. Yeah.
And then the other question I had was, it mentioned about multiple offenses, referral to a more intensive therapy program. I mean, that could also happen, I'm assuming, at a first offense, if somebody's severe issues. Do we have information about, is that the district paying to send them there? Is that the individual's responsibility?
To beyond our program?
Yes.
Our proposal, because we didn't want to contribute more money to, would be on the family cost, or if there would be scholarships somewhere in the community, that might be an option too, but we didn't know if that was our role to say we would help pay beyond what we could provide.
So that would be more of a soft referral, or
Right.
like just a referral,
Right.
but not a mandatory participation necessarily, if they chose not to participate.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Trustee Graves.
You had said that this is a 6 through 12 program.
Well, and this is another thing, we've had conversations with middle school, and depending upon the type of offense that the middle school student had, they would get referred to the assessment, but whether they go in, you know, with the other students or not, talked to Mr. Gunther, and we've had some conversations on how best to, you know, individualize the middle school offender. But we would definitely want to get them assessed if there was an offense in the middle school.
So if there was an alcoholic or a drug or alcohol offense at the middle school, there would be the assessment, and then it would be a recommendation,
Yeah.
whether, so the child may possibly go in the 2-week program, might not go in the 2-week
Or
program.
less, if that's what the assessment is. And I think that's where we go the MDT approach, the admin, the drug counselor, and Todd and Fritz, Rob, and we kind of meet together and find out what's the best for the kid based on what we find out in the assessment.
Right. I guess just a little bit of a follow-up on that. Some of the concerns that were brought up at the board meeting 3 weeks ago, and I guess it's still a concern of mine, that this is a one-size-fits-all program.
Yeah.
That, let's say somebody is,
With a cigarette?
yeah, and that would be a board policy change.
But I think that goes back to that assessment, and depending on that assessment, if they need the further intervention, they have it.
But I guess,
But if they don't need that intervention because of that.
so I guess the question is, so let's say somebody gets caught and they're drunk at school, and they have the assessment, and the assessment comes back and they don't think that there's addiction problems and there aren't other diagnosis going on with that child, and they don't recommend actually to go
Right.
through this 2-week program.
Right.
Then, is that a requirement?
Well, we're
Or will
recommending-
they be
Right.
assessed, is it a requirement to go to the 2 weeks, or will they be assessed to say?
Let me take you back to the comments that I made at the beginning, that we're struggling here between I don't understand this program, there's not enough structure around it, to it's one size fits all. So remember at the beginning when we were talking about, so we're going to give you, just for the sake of having something to grapple with in your mind, that the average thing might be the child is in this program for 2 weeks while they're learning to make better choices and connecting with the counselor and with the teacher type of thing. But it could be anything in between. It could be 3 weeks, it could be 1 week, it could be I immediately recommend you to more intensive therapy, it could be anything. So I don't think of it as it's 2 weeks and 2 weeks and that's the only way it's going to be.
Okay, I guess that's what I was thinking, because I feel like that's how it's.
That was the original, but after hearing feedback from the community and from our partners and doing research, we want to make sure it's individualized. But what we've learned is that the 10-day number, you can build a relationship with someone to help change their decision making. If you just make it a day or two, the first day they're going to be angry when they're in there anyways. You're not going to build much of a relationship and a connection to help check in. And tobacco, I've heard that a couple times. Yesterday, we found a vape on a kid in his vehicle, and I mean, we don't know if it had THC in the vape. We don't know if it's tobacco. And so I know there's cigarettes are considered not as bad as marijuana, which, okay, but it is against the law, federal law, to have tobacco on campus. And so, and I know it's a different offense, but vapes are very scary for us now because I may not even know what's in this vape without, and I'm not going to smoke it, but I mean, you don't know what's in it. I just got this vial with, and so I just want to come back for the tobacco on that. Okay, so I just wanted to add, it's scary for us. Thank you.
And we're about 6:45, so we've got 15 minutes, and we'll go ahead and open it up for more discussion at this time.
I have a follow-up on Catherine's question. Who would be the administrator or the decision maker on the duration of the time in the program?
The
Who
mental health
manages that?
therapist. Mental health therapist.
So the therapist will be the gatekeeper for that.
Thank you. Thanks for your questions.
Thank you.
I'll go ahead and jump in with one of my questions about the reentry plan. And it might just be an assumption on my part, but I think a key element of any reentry plan would be the parental involvement piece as well. And so much like our 501 plans, we would also be taking advantage of parental input for those reentry plans. Correct?
That's correct. And the parent also has to be there as a part of the intake, so that gets them involved immediately from how's this going to roll, how's it going to work, and all the way along. So,
Okay. Trustee Graves.
Can you go back, Lori, to
Oh.
the data slide?
Okay.
I was asking,
You have
well,
the slide here.
I didn't even see that.
I can, which one did you want,
So
Catherine?
in the beginning.
Oh, in the very
the
beginning.
table,
Oh, there it
I was
goes. That one?
Asking questions and I forgot to, so 2013, there were 5 expulsion hearings.
involving
Not
substance.
necessarily expulsions, but expulsion hearings. 2013-14, there was 4, and this year there were 7. I guess, just another, should have gone to another person.
Ask your question.
Part of the program is centered around group counseling and group activities, and these numbers, which are, they're different times, aren't very big to lend itself to group counseling and group activities. So I'm just wondering if anybody wants to.
Well, that could be very much the case. It could be an individual child over there. Because of the just living at the high school the last couple days, and knowing some of the things that they have been dealing with. And the parents, Mr. Nelson has had at least 2 parents in the last couple days in his office asking for something to help their child. So I'm not worried about finding the numbers at all. But if there is one child in there at a time, then it's one child in there at a time. And so of course you can't do group counseling at that time. But they could certainly be a part of maybe a group counseling with some of the kids that are doing ongoing work later on after they've gotten past the initial part.
Trustee Baker.
I'm glad to see the addition of, with the referral, that it's not just once you offend, but you could be just referred by themselves or by a parent, so that you don't have to offend to be part of it.
Part of the club.
Yeah, my question would be, if a parent or guardian or somebody is referring somebody who hasn't been caught, does it require them to, are they required to participate?
No.
I mean, so like, but if a parent wants their kid to go, but the kid hasn't done anything, is that enforceable? I mean, are we gonna
We're not-
basically force that child? to
We're not
participate?
going to take the child by the hand and drag them across the way, but if the parent wants them there and the parent is active in this, yes.
And then if any other teacher or administrator, it wouldn't be enforceable unless there was an actual offense.
Right. That's when we actually have the ability to.
Trustee Schwartz.
So we just visited Denver University this past weekend or weekend before with my son, and they have, you know, a huge issue. As a matter of fact, the guy who was giving the talk in front of probably 200 parents, he wasn't asked the question, so he said something about, and what do you do about, marijuana on campus? Glad you asked. You know, he said it to himself because nobody had asked. It was the elephant in the room. So he said that what they do there is that when they suspect an issue that is getting in the way of studying, they have a conversation with that student. And it's a very caring conversation, and that just struck me as a really good first step. It can only be between an adult that's not in a position of authority to be able to kick the kid out. I'm putting that out there because I don't know whether that's where something should start in order to create a connection. The second thing they do is they have something called DU Cares, which is exactly what I think you're talking about here, which is that a parent, or not so much a parent, someone on campus who's noticed a kid who's having a real issue is able to go to the caring individuals on campus and say, I'm worried about this person, with no repercussions. And then the DU campus staff, the caring staff, gets in touch with the kid. So that's kind of the I think those conversations are where things start, but the problem is that it can't be from the enforcers. And I don't know how that works in our school, but I was impressed by that.
I was going to say, Sharma, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I have those
Come on up to
conversations.
the
Oh, great.
microphone.
Yep.
So your voice will be picked up on the recording. Because she's been very involved in this process.
Hi, I'm a counselor at the high school, and I have those conversations with kids all the time about healthy, balanced, you would be shocked about how much weed they smoke, how often they smoke, but I don't have any resources really to refer them to. So this kind of program, I already have those relationships. I just need a place to refer.
The way that this program sounds right now is it's more of a, they don't have a choice, right? Or do they?
I think you would be shocked
Yeah,
by the
you
number
do.
of self-referrals
You can be
and parent
suspended or
referrals.
That's what I was just
enrolled.
referring to,
okay.
is self-referral
Yeah.
and
It's a choice.
parent referral
Okay,
or.
but I mean,
referral.
but it's an either or, either you're gonna be kicked out or you can self-refer. Not kicked out,
If
sorry.
you're
Or you can just sign up.
If you're
So
caught.
yeah, but
Okay.
before they offend, you could still participate.
Okay,
That's a
but when
change.
they come into you and you have that conversation and they say, I wanna go of my own free will, does that show on their record?
I would say no.
Okay. Because that's, you know, what you want to have it based on trust and caring. I'm not putting you on a spot like this, I'm just saying in general.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
A
You want-
punitive program won't work.
Exactly, where it looks like, if I don't answer the right way, I'm gonna have a record.
What has to show on the record for state reporting purposes is suspension from school and expulsion.
So if the kids don't refer to this program, it would show up as a suspension?
No, it is not a suspension.
And even if they were referred, it would not be a suspension.
It's only if they got caught and then were put in there?
Even as
It wouldn't be a
caught,
suspension?
It is not a
It is not a
suspension.
suspension because they're still participating in school.
So this is not, okay, that's good to know.
I'm so glad to hear about your role, because I think it's that's the first line is that the adults have to be seen as caring and informed and, you know, willing to get into the space of the student versus, I'm not saying, you know, that's exactly what you're doing.
I agree, and I think middle school level and high school level, the counseling office and the social workers have pretty exceptional relationships with students and would collaborate really closely with a mental health counselor in referrals and managing curriculum or, you know, what would work in our classrooms.
That last exchange went quickly, I need some clarity. So, if you opt into, if you're caught and you opt into this program, then you are choosing your way out of a registered suspension on your record?
Yes,
Okay, clear.
suspension or expulsion.
Yeah, and
So this will not show, if you choose to do
It's not an
this.
out-of-school suspension. It
So
does not
there's an
show.
incentivization to
It's not reportable.
But it is, I just want to say, but there is an element of, this is going to sound like a strong word, coercion, because you're not going to choose suspension. So there's a free will, but not really a free will.
There's some absolute value to that though, because if you go,
Yeah.
you can ask the school administrators when they go to fill out college application, college school report, at the very end of the school report is a line, have you been suspended or expelled for, and have you been suspended or had any infraction in your career? The student has anything in a career. So if that shows and that goes to Harvard, they may look at you differently than if that was not filled out. So there is absolute incentivization to this program in that regard.
The intent is not coercion either, but in order to try and get the help
Incentivized
to the students who really need it.
Right. I think that what I'm looking at is trying to find out if this is truly an exchange with equal partners, and there's a power element here. So.
Yeah.
Trustee Baker.
I just want to go back to my comments when we were speaking to Dan about the changing the culture, because I feel like this program is going to help kids who have already gone down that path. And we talked a little bit about the educational piece, but I think that having it flushed out of how you're going to make those positive emotional connections of those early ages to make it uncool to do these things.
I agree with you, and that will be another, I mean, they're coming back with the high school program later, the committee's working on the middle school program. We're bringing it to you in pieces.
Okay.
We're building the airplane as we fly it.
So that's on the agenda for development.
It's coming. It's part of the goal 4.
Trustee Graves.
I guess, a concern I still have from the last meeting, and I appreciate, Dan, you bringing back some other feedback about time out of the classroom, but I still have concerns about that, because I know there's research on the other side that says, time out of the classroom, out of the school, can actually lead to dropouts and more suspensions and whatnot. So that's one of my biggest concerns. Maybe for some kids, it will work to be in the program with a teacher getting caught up on their work. But I'm thinking if it was my son that was put into the program, when he misses 3 days of his classes, it's very difficult to catch up with his classes. not hearing the lectures, not taking the tests, not getting instruction. So that's still, I guess, a big concern of mine is being out of the classroom. For some kids it may be a benefit, but for other kids it might not, and that's still a concern that I have.
Trustee Baker.
So I think one of the ways to address that potentially would be, as we're doing an evaluation of their mental health and their abuse or addiction problem, would be an academic evaluation as well, to look at the big picture and whole picture for this child. Because if you have a student, like if it's your son and he kind of made a big goof, but it's not typical, but they feel it's important, I think that you need to look at that big picture of academic evaluation, abuse, all three aspects when making a decision. And if that was part of the intake process, it would address that issue. Is that something you guys have considered, or would that be part of an intake process?
I think that would be good. I mean, that would be part of the assessment, in my mind, that the therapist would look at. But we have families that go on a African safari for 2 weeks. We have ski teamers that are gone for skiing in New Zealand or wherever they go. So we do have families in Maui going for 2 weeks. So I agree, we don't want them out of school. We don't, but at the same point, we want to try to get help because they said addiction's a disease from what I saw, and so we're treating it, and we don't want kids out of school. That's why we're trying to get the academic support too when they're out of it. But you're right, maybe the podcasts of stuff down the road with flipping classrooms we can have, but
there's just definitely a difference, because my son did miss a week
Right.
for a ski team,
Right.
and it was
it's hard.
it was really hard, and I don't know if I would do that again.
Right. All right, just as a reminder, it's getting close to 7 o'clock. We're going to be moving on to the policy 602.
Can we not do public comment?
We are doing public comment, and it will be at the end of the meeting.
It will. Can I not talk about my son? This program is such a
We're
good
going to
program.
public comment at the
No.
I appreciate your patience. We have a multitude of public comment. So, but I really appreciate the feedback that has been listened to by staff and the adaptations. This isn't the same program that was presented to us straight from Virginia Beach. It's been adapted and catered to our needs and what works best for our students in our school districts. And I appreciate the time and effort given by both Mr. McGee and all the community partners. But I appreciate the direction of the discussion and the importance that the board is giving on it at this time. With that, we will have our discussion on policy 602.12. And Kathy, Trustee Graves, I know we had discussed this in the past, you wanting to have this on the agenda. I'd like to share your thoughts on this.
Yeah, so this policy, number 602.12, about instructional arrangements, class sizes, has come up a lot in the last couple of months while we've been reallocating teachers at elementary schools, middle school, high school. And so I've been looking at a lot, and I guess I have a couple questions. Do we have this so that...
It's not on the screen. I have some extras here, if anyone would like to have a paper copy.
Is there any way to bring it up through the website? Is that possible?
Don't have it hooked up.
Back in the corner, is it just you?
It's
Just you.
It's just me. No one's in the corner. They're doing the webcast remotely.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Just so people can see it. So I'm going to start from the bottom up. And the number, I'll just read it for everybody.
Gwen Carroll, do you want to?
It just says, it is recommended that when a subject area average class size or grade level average class size drops below 15 students, that a position be eliminated and a staff member be transferred or released. So under this, I'm not sure exactly how to frame my comments here. This policy was written in 2011. Oh, I thought did I read that wrong in the first place? Anyway, and it says 15 students, and it's to go across the whole district, elementary through high school. And I would like to actually remove this because I am concerned that there's some upper level courses at the high school that may have less than 15 students, and that it's different between an elementary classroom compared to a middle school classroom and a high school classroom. And so that's one comment I have.
You want to talk about that before we go to the others as a board?
Sure. And I guess my comment is I know that we value a lot of these dual credit upper level and AP classes. And if we have 9 students sign up for these classes, I think it's important that these classes still run. I know that there's been talk about combining classrooms, teaching during past classes, and if some of those ideas they work, they don't inhibit learning for the students, maybe that will work. I don't know, so I wanted to have a discussion about that.
I'll open it up for discussion. Trustee Baker.
Well, I would concur with Catherine. My concern would be, I think that there's sometimes workarounds that make sense, such as offering them every other year, or possibly combining them, possibly putting them in a past class. But I also believe that that should not be a hard, fast rule with those type of courses. When you're talking one section of a day for one semester or one section of a day for the year, unless we were truly in a position where we did not have the funding or staff to be able to do that. And if we got to where we need to get bare bones, I think that, again, I wouldn't want to be cutting that area as opposed to looking at other areas to cut if it was a funding issue. Because I think those opportunities are a part of the flagship of why we are Blaine County and what we provide. And when we talk about what we do well and how many courses that we offer, and those advanced opportunities are extremely important. And I think that we need to ensure that the students who maybe have been working for years to reach that point have an adequate chance at being successful in that class and a quality education for those courses at that level. And while it may work, like I said, to do some of these alternative methods, sometimes that's not the case. And if this is causing that to happen, then I want to change this for those types of courses.
Any other thoughts? Trustee Shore.
So one of the parents in this community who actually had a kid who was valedictorian in the class, her comment was, how do you get kids to take these upper level classes if you don't offer them? And I think
just for a reminder, Liz, when we're basing decisions off community members' input, that needs to be made public.
Okay, so the person was Carol Freund, who's going to be on this board. At any rate, she made that comment, and that was very it was very cut and dried. You always have your kids who are out in front of the other kids, and you're not going to have a class size instantly that's going to go into that real upper level class. I remember when we were looking at IB and doing diploma program, one of the big things that you have to get over when you do something where you're holding the bar up higher and having more kids try to reach that bar is you have to give those kids a chance to be able to take those courses, and there's going to be less of them in the beginning by a lot. And I remember hearing that the first class of DP, diploma program kids at Aspen, it was only 3, and that's their flagship program now. I think I heard a comment about it being, these are our fighter pilots. And I think that's a really good analogy. So, yeah, what's the big picture here? You know, that's to me, that overrides anything that's kind of by the book.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I think that to put a cap or from minimum of 15 on upper level high school courses is not appropriate, because you're going to have kids aspiring to higher level classes that are going to not have the enrollment capability. And I think that's something we have to put on to the school administrators to say, what is their minimum carrying capacity, right? Like, what is their ability to manage? It's different at an elementary level, or at an elementary level, when it's one class all day long, we have 8 kids. Is that going to really be a starter for us? Probably not, right? But when it's one period of one day, and it's 5 kids, is that where, I'd love to know the number from them where it carries and what they feel. And that, I mean, I don't expect the answer right now.
Well, I can give you the answer right now.
Could you?
Because Mr. Nelson has provided us with some information on classes. So right now, and I also have to add the caveat here that one of the things that I've been pretty emphatic about is we cannot have AP classes of 35 like we had this year. So we have AP classes of 4 and we have AP classes of 35. And there's got to be some balance in between the two of those. And so some of the departments have borne the brunt of other departments having small classes. So right now, and Keith double-checked my math here, we have, and not all of them are AP, but these are small classes. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 classes that are under 15. None of them have been cut. They have all found ways to make them happen anyway. None of them have been cut. They're all in different areas, of course, but that is basically 2 additional teachers. So,
How many of those are AP versus just general electives that are not popular anymore?
I would say, 2 of them are accounting, calculus, literature, those are all AP, music theory, which would be another music teacher. There is no more time in the teacher's schedules. Art, which would be another art teacher. There's no more time in the art teacher's schedule. So, 2 DI classes and a GATE seminar.
And which of those were AP though?
Calc, literature, music theory, art. And then the DI is still an advanced opportunity, 2 DI classes, and a GATE seminar, which is an advanced opportunity.
So those last 3 are AP or not AP?
They are
Just
not
advanced
AP, but they are advanced opportunity classes where we are going to have fewer students.
And which of those courses are sequential courses versus just a one-off that could be maybe every other year offering or every other 1 semester a year kind of thing? Because that's kind of really my concern is when you are talking about sequential courses, and especially when you're getting the very high level courses, are these alternative methods to offer the courses really the most effective way for those students to be learning?
If you'll remember the new course guide you approved earlier, it does have some science classes. The AP science classes are flipped so that the kids know ahead of time in the even years, this is what I can take, in the odd years, this is what I can take. The calc is, of course, sequential. AP Lit is usually, where's Keith? Usually in lieu of a senior or a 12th grade class. AP Lit.
Right.
It would be, so that year and that year only, pretty much,
IT
unless
year.
I'm doubling up in my junior year on my English language arts. Music theory, that's just a pure fact that we have wonderful music programs and we have a music teacher who's totally booked. So it would be hiring another music teacher part-time to be able to expand that. Same thing with art. We have 1 art teacher who is totally booked. So she's willing to do these classes simultaneously, but the only way to address it would be to hire another art teacher to teach some more sections. because there is no more time. The DI is a sequential piece. And GATE seminar, that's not sequential, that's a,
From my perspective and my point of view, I think we want to encourage our advanced opportunities, whether it be
Certainly.
DI, GATE, AP. I don't think we want to completely cut out those courses if they drop below 15, but I think we need to be creative in how we're offering them as well. I think that would be my comment.
and I,
So can we or could you calculate the cost of delivery of one course, and can we go out and find adjunct faculty in that regard to deliver that one-off particular course when it may arise and it's small? Is that the-
if they are certified. I'm looking at our AHR director here.
They have to meet HQ standards by the state and the federal government, so you can't just hire anybody.
It's not
You
quite
gotta
like a
have- You gotta have a
university.
credential and an HQ person to teach that class.
Is it
The other thing I
possible-
would point out is that when, because I was a principal under this policy, and we ran smaller classes than 15, it says it is recommended. So it gave discretion to the building principal. There were times I had to cut a class of 5, because it hit the paper when I cut journalism at 5, but that was in favor of putting that English teacher into a class of 22. So I had the choice of serving 5 or serving 22 in an elective type situation. If you're going to take that off, then you're going to take away that ability to, this doesn't say high school, by the way.
Right.
So
And
It
I-
could be applied though.
And I do
Yes,
want to
sir.
stress,
Apply them, yeah.
none of these classes have been cut.
But they're having to be offered in a non-traditional classroom setting in order to continue.
Many of them are, in order to make it.
I have one more
I
question
want
in
to flip
regard.
what you said.
I got to follow up on my own question.
Okay.
So, I don't know how the regulations are in that regard in Idaho. I know from my experience in Utah, actually the board has the authority to certify a teacher locally.
No.
We could do that there, you can't do that in
No.
state of Idaho?
Uh-uh.
Okay.
So I want to flip what you said. Rather than finding somebody to teach the AP course, because we already have teachers that are qualified to do that, if
Gotcha.
you release them from one of their regular courses to teach that AP course, you could find a teacher that could do what you suggested to fulfill that lower level, potentially, unless that particular math teacher is teaching only AP all day long.
The certification in the state of Idaho is the same, regardless of whether I'm teaching 10th grade math or AP. Now, what we do as a district is we send them to AP training.
Right.
But the certification under the state is still the same, so I still have to find a highly qualified certified teacher.
Gotcha.
Mr.
So
Nelson.
it's not simple.
If I could just clarify something, we reached out to CSI because we're right next door to them. And just comparing our school to the dual credit options at Twin Falls, they have a 35 courses that can just go right next door from Canyon Ridge, right behind them to Twin Falls, or to CSI and take those classes. They drive off the parking lot, they drive into the next one. We reached out to Hallie at the community campus at CSI and said, do you have any options for us? For example, the advanced calculus class. We said with 5 students, we can't do that. The other option that we're waiting for an answer is Laurel Nelson with IDLA, who has a consortium that she can draw from that may have that option for us. And to bring an online class with Amy Swanson, who is our AP Calc teacher, as that proctor, which I think would be an excellent option to make these classes work. I don't ever want to discredit an advanced course being just AP, because when we said accounting, we kind of let it roll off our tongue, but it is a dual credit course, as well as and she was very, why don't I do this with this, because she can teach Quicken Books, which is a dual credit course through CSI as well. And I'm just thinking that, I'm just looking at our course numbers. Ms. Swanson has built that AP program so that next year she's teaching 41 AP Calc AV students. I see a class of probably 20 or 25 possibly BC Calc kids next year, easily. So as she builds that course, I think we solve our problem. I think we just have a deficit for a year where we really have to kind of solve this problem.
So is there a need to have her in a different classroom that she can't continue to, if she's teaching ABC Calc this year, and she's teaching it not next year, but the following year, what is she gonna do this next year if it wasn't offered as a traditional classroom and she's doing it as a pass class?
She would be, I think.
I mean, if it's, is it a true staffing issue that you need her somewhere else and you can't offer it, or you have to do it in conjunction with the BC course?
Well, if I load up a class of Algebra 2, a class with 30 kids, that's where the problem we run into, or stats. I mean, if you look at my AP stats class, there's 65 kids in there, so I need to run 2 sections. I'm gonna lose a few kids, but that's big. And that's not the only class that's big. I mean, I have geometry that's large. So you gotta think about that. Where do you sacrifice, where do you need that teacher? You need the teacher in Algebra 1, where you have, we'd like to have maybe 20 kids in there, or do you wanna put 28 kids in an Algebra 1 class, or we're gonna struggle. So it's a balance.
Well, I guess
I hate to interrupt, but we've passed our time for this, and we can continue this discussion on the May agenda. But I think we need to be courteous of our public's time as well. They're being patient and adhere to our timeline. So, with no objections.
Well, actually, I do have a little bit of an objection. So Rob needs to leave, and I think it's important for him to hear the public comment. So maybe we move to public comment and we resume the discussion about the classroom sizes after the public comment.
Opposed to that?
I'm agreeable to that.
All right, well, we will go ahead and move forward with our public comment then, and we'll first hear from Judge Eno. And if you would, please come, state your name, and Lori, would you help us keep track of
Yes.
time?
Well, yeah, look at there.
Thank you so much.
Uh-huh.
We have a 3 minutes as I speak. Great. I can clear my throat in about 2 minutes. I am Judge Mark Ingram. I'm the Lincoln County Magistrate Judge. I'm also the juvenile court judge here in Blaine County, Gooding County, Jerome County, and I'm the statewide juvenile court judge for the Supreme Court of Idaho, involved in policy issues regarding juvenile justice. I tell you that background because I'm familiar with the cultural issues in Wayne County with regards to substance abuse. I'm familiar with the research regarding interventions and effective interventions around issues of substance abuse. I'm familiar with the population of kids that we have here. And I want to first of all congratulate the committee on the goals that have been set out for the ASAP program. I think they're wonderful goals. I do, however, question the efficacy of the manner of delivery. It does occur to me as I listen tonight and as I've read the materials that one of the principal goals that is being sought to be achieved in this 2-week period is developing a connection between the counselor and the student. That's a laudable goal, certainly, but you are first of all, there are certain principles of effective intervention. They include assessment of risk, first of all. Now, risk comes in a lot of forms. These kids that we have, they're not just a substance abuse issue because they get caught with a cigarette. My most famous story that I tell frequently is that I saw a kid for the first time coming into a diversion program for his first citation for a cigarette. Full-blown IV heroin user. Kids come in different stripes. That's an extreme case, certainly. What we typically have here is what has become largely prevalent in Blaine County, but it's everywhere as well. A kind of normalizing socialization behavior
that is acquainted, that is now part of the culture of the community. And that is the real underlying issue that I think that the school is grappling with and trying to address. You're going to do that by segregating, and let's call it what it is. They are being segregated into an in-school suspension in order to address that issue by building connections. I think that you need to back up a little bit and think about that on a larger scale. I'm not talking about individuals who get caught with a cigarette or a joint at school. We're talking about the whole school needing to address this underlying cultural phenomenon that is at play here. And you're not going to do that in a one-off 2-week class. Kids who have, my kid who had the tobacco ticket was an IV heroin guy. He's not going to have an effective treatment outcome as a result of a 2-week course that is educating him about the evils of drugs and alcohol. That is not going to work for that kid.
1 minute, please. 1 more minute, I'm sorry.
Okay, I could ramble for another 40, but what you really are trying to address is a whole school climate problem, and you're not going to get there with this program. And you're going to get there, and I'm going to take some exception to restorative justice is not synonymous with student courts. It is a different animal entirely. And when we talk about restorative practices as opposed to restorative justice, you're talking about the ability to change a whole school climate, which requires deep commitment at all staff levels and the buy-in of the student body to do that. And there are certainly programs out there available to do that. So my minute is up, and I will yield.
Thank you for your comment. Mr. Andy Barnes.
I'll yield 2 minutes of my time to Judge Ingram.
And another.
Click.
If you think of your school as having component parts, which include students, staff, administration, and members of the community as all component parts of that school. The manner in which individuals engage with students is so important. We keep track, through our assessment processes of juvenile justice, we keep track of school data because it's an important factor in terms of risk for reoffense. It's an important factor in terms of whether or not they're going to come back into my system. So one of the things that's striking about the data, and we've been keeping track of now for about 7 years, is that a frighteningly large percentage of kids feel like school is important. However, they do not feel like it's encouraging, and they do not feel like they have any support from, they do not feel close to any staff or teacher. That is the striking statistic that stands out from my data. That we do not have a culture at the school level which creates those connections at a root level rather than having to be referred out to make a connection with a counselor. Right? That's my 2. Go ahead. Yes.
On?
Is the green light on, Andy? Green light? Let me help you.
Now it's green light. Hi, my name's Andy Barnes, and you're probably getting tired of hearing from me. But a couple of things have struck me in the last several weeks that I've been involved in this. And And I wrote an article back in February, nobody called me, and that's fine. But I went to a session that I was asked to participate in, and superintendent has mentioned that session. And I was shown there that in order to do research, you need to look at a program and evaluate it in comparison to a well-matched, randomly assigned control group. In studies of at least 12 weeks in duration, involving a total of at least 250 experimental and 250 control students, using fair, reliable measures of skills taught in all groups. And then that program has found to increase achievement more than the control group by at least 20% of a standard deviation. And my concern is that this program, which there was no mention of cost tonight, but the last board meeting it was $250,000, $250,000 of expense, and it was at the cost of moving a number of positions from the elementary school to this program, to elementary school teachers to be moved out of the elementary school to fund this program. And the program hasn't been evaluated. Now, I went to a meeting, I was asked by Dan McGee and some other people to attend a meeting to talk about giving some input informally at the meeting. And they asked me, Mr. McGee asked me, what do you want? And I said, well, I think there should be punishment factor into this, but that it can be done in Saturday school. So on a week later, I see on the board, tried, not, the very low attendance. I don't see any figures to that. I said, let's do after school. Tried. No, not attractive. No figures on it. No research, nothing. I hear that
One more
there's
minute.
Anecdotal information about going to talk with John Mitchell, who's a district court judge who deals with adult mental health court, not going to see your local juvenile justice judge, Judge Ingram. So I'm wondering, where is the fair and balanced research and investigation into the merits of this program? I also hear mention of, we can't do restorative justice because of the culture. Well, if you look around the country, Oakland, San Bernardino, I think in New Orleans, I'm losing now, but there's other big cities and school districts that have done restorative justice. And you can't tell me that the culture in the Oakland School District before they started restorative justice was such that you just cast it off. You automatically reject it. That's not balanced, fair research. You have to look at those programs. The culture there started the same way. You've got to change the culture. Restorative justice is a way to do it. And I'm just very concerned that there is a rush to get to this 10-day program. I also hear the word, I looked at the numbers. I used to be an economist. I looked at these numbers. I go, 25 people, but we don't know what they're really done. Divide that 25 into 250,000, and that's $10,000 per person that year, okay, in this program. And we don't know anything about that. We haven't done the assessment. And my concern is that we talk about addicts and talk about addiction. Well, if you're really trying to deal with addicted people, and there are addicted people in the schools, a 2-week program is not going to work. It will be a monumental failure. So I just ask that you look at the research that's been done, look at the numbers that are being looked at, look at the cost and the alternative costs of doing a program like this. Again, the goals are great. I've always said that. Just think, if you keep people in their classes, if you deal with them after, the large percentage of them will be as successful as the people in this program. And one of the concerns I have is everybody tonight says, well, we'll do an assessment. Well, you can't do an assessment between noon, when you find somebody who may have a joint in their pocket, and 8 o'clock the next morning. What are they going to do? Are you going to send them into the program or not? So an assessment may take a couple of weeks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Julie Dahlgren.
Still a teacher, I have my props. I guess what I want to say is a little historical in that I've been involved with the district for a long time, and we've gone from absolutely nothing, really no help for a child that might end up being expelled because of either violence or drugs, alcohol. And I mean, the day we got DSS going was so helpful to the board. Now, I know the board's always in a difficult position. In Idaho, they do have executive, legislative, and judicial responsibilities, not like Oregon trustees who don't deal with judicial matters. They have panels that sit in expulsion hearings or teacher hearings. They do not have judicial responsibility, but we in Idaho do. So the board here has many, many times been in hearings and have had broken hearts and tried to do the best they can for the kids. Sometimes the best thing they did was to be able to put them into a justice system because the parents were not home for them, the parents were abusive, and sometimes before we had some academic help for suspended or expelled and suspended students, the best thing we could do was to get them into a system where at least they could get some help, counseling, and academics. I applaud what the district is trying to do now in creating a program for kids that are in the drug culture and abuse drug and alcohol. I think it's another step toward being a good district and helping as many kids as possible. I always am amazed that we're so small here in our valley, but we think we're a big city. We think we have all these arms to reach out to and help, but we're really not that big a community. The National Institute of Educational Statistics classifies we're actually what's called a small town, and it ranges from a large city to a mid-sized city to an urban fringe city to an urban fringe city for small cities, large towns, small towns, and then finally rural. We're on the edge of rural. And I think that our community is just amazing that we actually have as much as we do.
1 minute, Julie.
One more minute. I know it's an expensive program, and my understanding is that through attrition, through retirements, et cetera, that perhaps it's not as expensive as $250,000, $250,000. Maybe that can be absorbed through moving staff around. But I know our counselors have good relationships with their students. We just at the Ed Foundation just gave a Grit Scholarships, which is for kids that really endure a lot of hardship, show courage, and are able to maintain good standings in schools. And a lot of those kids are affected by family, alcohol, and drug habits. So anyway, I guess I'm just here to say, I know that judicial responsibilities for the board are difficult, and there's hardly any professional development. I published an article just about that, and I wrote an entire dissertation on expulsion, from expulsion to success. And just because a child is not in a regular classroom does not mean that they will not be successful.
Mr. Thomas. Pardon me, there we go. I'll check this on the webcast. Pardon me, believe. Thanks for your time, Rob.
Thank you, Eric Thomas, parent, and I spoke a couple weeks ago. First off, I'd really like to say Mr. McGee's research with Dr. Meyer, everything that he said about the concerns and the dangers are very realistic, and I don't think anybody is minimizing this. I would say when it comes to risk activities, and Dr. Meyer supports that, I do wholeheartedly as well, but a one-day ropes course or one-day intervention isn't going to cut it. Something such as the BRAVE program that Drug Coalition participates in, and many of the youth who do participate in it are having great success, but it's a program where people work with the youth. It's not prescriptive. It's voluntary. They cooperate. It's a mutual gain, much more than what Trustee Squirtle was talking about. I recall in the last meeting, Trustee Squirrel asked for options, or bring me some alternatives to this, rather than just fleshing it out. So even though I have great reservations about any suspension program, I see the numbers as being a real issue. And I think we can take this to a larger level, and any kid who is at risk from or failing to thrive in our school system, to give this type of wraparound program to, not necessarily out of the classroom, but is there a way to keep, let's make this more of a dropout prevention program rather than simply drugs and alcohol. There are a lot of kids. The other part is it is a blank check regardless, because everything we keep hearing, and I'm really glad to hear there's some more flexibility than there was a month and a half ago in the program, reading the Post. We still don't have the program on paper unless it's the PowerPoint that was presented a month ago, in which case it's not going to work. A 2-week intensive outpatient intervention program is not going to address the adults' needs. So I would really urge to back up. So where to go from here is what I heard was the directive in the last board meeting. And I would suggest getting that mental health therapist online. I would really highly suggest getting some assessments and choosing a very assessment. Efficient assessment. I just watched the Pirates Bizance the other night, and I can never see why. So anyway, there are things that could be done to begin the process to address this. And I
1
think that
minute,
would be
Eric.
great. I think it should have some very serious oversight. If you were to start with the mental health therapist, even using the resources you currently have, do the assessments, start doing treatment plans, programming, getting kids back in school as soon as possible, if appropriate. And then develop it with a board that has some significant oversight to make sure that best practices are being followed. The things that Mr. McGee talked about, yes, but do not allow our fear or our concern or our great desire to help these kids lead us down the path to get a program that might not meet its goals. As I stated last week, I don't believe it will. And with my last couple minutes, I'd like to...
No.
Well, I mean, 1 minute. Well, Ms. Garvin, Ms. Garvin left this auditorium a little bit earlier, and I know she really wanted to make a statement, and it's very near and dear to her at this point. And I will let you know from her behalf that from her son's perspective, she really wishes that there was an opportunity like this for him. Thank you.
Ms. Christopher.
Hi, I'm Christopher, and I'm a parent here in Blaine County. I'm also a licensed professional clinical counselor. And I've been licensed here in Idaho for about 20 years. I've worked for a long time with the Juvenile Justice Department here in Blaine County, with judges, as a mental health counselor working with juveniles. And I just wanted to make a couple of comments. I know that the purpose, or at least one of the primary purposes of this particular program, is to ensure opportunities for kids to stay in school and to graduate. That of the 32 children, and correct me if I'm wrong, who did not graduate in 2014, I would be curious, though, to know if any of those kids had experienced suspension or expulsion prior to their not finishing school. And I do know that 20 of those students had some substance misuse or abuse issues, so I understand that as well. But I think there are two issues, and I'm trying to talk really fast here. There are two
You're
issues.
fine.
One is that in order for a change of student culture and a culture of connection and a culture of belonging to occur in Blaine County schools, the no tolerance policy for any kinds of offenses is going to need to be reformed. And it will be really important to do that, because when you, and again, this would be a paradigm shift, because this is really moving from kind of a zero tolerance model, which we all know started in the 90s, and it came out of a school violence issue, and moving more from this kind of place of control, kind of a culture of control, to a culture that really includes accountability and connection. And that's going to be a policy issue that I think the board I would really strongly hope that the board takes a look at in terms of policy revision as we go forward with some of these fantastic ideas that the administration is presenting. That's the first thing. Really quickly, I want to bring up restorative practices, and I'm just going to read my notes straight. Restorative practices programs, why they're so wonderful, is because they focus on building community capacity. Drug and alcohol misuse or abuse is not merely a problem in its own right, but it is also symptomatic of youth disconnection, lacking a sense of belonging, finding a place in my school. Restorative practices are not simply directed at curbing a drug and alcohol use, but changing student culture and strengthening the social ties of youth with adults and institutions like their schools. What's different about restorative practices is that rather than focusing on a single offender and their individual issues, attention is equally paid to all stakeholders, everyone in that rule-breaking experience, including relevant community members, other students, and administrators, meaning the entire school community is affected by someone's individual offense. Rather than based on the clinical work of a counselor, the individual counselor-offender relationship, the basis for a student adjustment is in his or her natural community relationships that need strengthening. Meaning, I'm remaining in my school setting, I'm strengthening those community relationships, and that's contributing to a strong school students culture. And I don't have a need to do pot in the parking lot. So that's important. The approach also extends beyond the focus of students' needs and obligations to a larger social context. So building those community connections both within and outside the school itself. Education, job training, employment, community service. All the things that we want kids to do and be successful at so that they ultimately graduate from high school. That's the goal. That's why we want a program like this, but ultimately we need to get at it from a different way. Thank you.
Hi.
Ms. Teresa Escobar.
Thank you. I probably don't need a microphone. I'm Teresa Escobar. I'm present as a parent, but it's important for people to know probably that I have 25 years of experience in juvenile justice, working with at-risk programs, intervention programs, and research. I'd like to thank the board, Superintendent Dan McGee and his team for looking at addressing this issue. I do have some concerns. My concerns are, I agree with a lot of the things that have already been said, so I'm not going to reiterate those, but yes, one of the big concerns I have is why suspension period. And I don't think there's a lot of research, and I will provide some information to the board and have, that says that everybody that commits a certain type of offense needs to be suspended. And in fact, there's lots of model discipline policies that include suspension as an option, but it's not the only option. Drug and alcohol violations in most of the programs I've looked at are on a continuum of all kinds of discipline issues. Drugs and alcohol just falls under that, and there is a variety of options that you can use to deal with these violations and to address the individual needs of the student. My issue with the program, and there has been suggestion today that it'll be flexible, is that it is a one-size-fits-all, right? If everybody that violates the drug and alcohol policy goes to this program, it's not individualized. And I would support, which we've shared with the team, somebody that could do functional assessments on each student that gets referred for discipline. So you also might identify somebody that gets referred for a different reason that has a substance use issue. And that's really what needs to be addressed. And looking at really only separating kids from school when there's a safety issue, or when they're disruptive, or it's an ongoing issue, or it meets certain criteria, that just as a general rule to suspend every kid based on you fall into this category, there's not data to support that that's a good idea. And I have some of the same concerns that Trustee Graves brought up about different kids have different needs, and there may be some kids that really need more intensive support. That 2 weeks is not going to be enough for them. It's a start, it's nice. We send kids away to intensive, in residential treatment for 3 months, and they come back, and that is often not successful. That's not enough. So I just would encourage the board to look at discipline as a whole. There's a continuum of discipline options, and pulling drug and alcohol violations back into an overall discussion about discipline and making sure that you're looking at individual students' needs, identify their risks, their needs, and what is the best strategy to help them be successful. Thank you.
Mr. Keith Nelson.
Ooh, nice catch. Nice catch. Good first step. Thank you, Keith Nelson. I'm assistant principal at Woodrow High School. It's kind of an interesting time for us to be hearing this discussion because we've heard it over and over and over again. The 7 to 8 expulsions, I've been a part of 6 of those this year already. And we were asked this year to give the board options. We don't have any options to give to the board other than all the district policy. And we decided on that because we want to see a change. And we think that the options that the board is looking for is something that we're trying to provide to them. I'm looking at our discipline policy right here. And actually, it does say for a first offense, 30 days, 15 days out, or 15 days if the parents participate in an assessment, 5 days more if they do community service, but it's 10 days out of school suspension. That's what it says. It's written a little bit incorrectly here, but it's 10 days out of school suspension for the first offense. The second offense simply is expulsion. That's the recommendation that we're supposed to give you to the board. But the board has asked over and over and over again, we need another option for you. We don't have another option. We would like to give you an option to say, yeah, we do have a program that we can put students in. And I'm sorry, but the students, from my perspective, and I've seen them very successful, going to an in-house program, coming back and going, wow, can I go back because I'm focused on my schoolwork? There are no distractions. There are no cell phones. There's nothing to go on except my schoolwork. So they come back very successful. We invited a young lady here tonight that you know as a school board, and she's a very brave young lady. You know her because she is a successful student with the options that you gave her. You expelled her, but she came back. And I believe in no student being left behind, and she's one of those success stories that I feel pretty strongly about. I know that she's a little bit nervous about speaking today, but I think that she would if you gave her the option, and if you invited her up here, she would tell you her story. And I'm not going to tell you her story because that's not my job. But I believe in what we're trying to do because I think that it's important that we give students another reason to say no. And if we don't do that, data, I can tell you the data right now is that we don't give students another option, they're just going to go and repeat over and over and over again. And sure, we can.
1 minute.
Thank you. Dan and I talked about this. We said that if we had a little bit of time, let's compare the people that we suspend to the Idaho repository and the people that are expelled to that Idaho repository. I've looked at them over and over and over again. That repository, the repeat offenders are on that list. They're repeat offenders. They're not in our school anymore, but we know them because we suspended them, we expelled them, and there they are over and over and over again. And they keep repeating. They're repeat offenders. So something's not going right, whether it's from our level. We're not helping them when they're young or as they get older and older, but somewhere we have to start. But I would invite you to, if we could, ask that young lady to come up here and tell you her story. Thank you.
My name is Melanie, and I want to speak to this today because from my personal experience, I've been getting expelled for 32 days. It made me realize that I didn't want to stay in school and I didn't want to just be home doing nothing but working. And from what I've heard of this plan, I think it would have helped me a lot because it was really hard for me to catch up on my homework once I came back. And if this program was created when I was suspended, I would have chosen to be a part of it because, with all the support with therapists and having somebody to talk to, it would have helped me to understand why I shouldn't do it. And with are the negative things about it, and it made me like feel like I had more of a chance to do better in school and do better for myself in life, and it made it easier for me to not go back to smoking, and it gave me like more of a reason to say no besides trying to do it on my own, because like doing it on my own is kind of hard, and I had the support of Mr. McGee and Mr. Nelson and Sharma, and they really helped me, and I think that if I had a therapist with that too, and I was around people that have done the same thing, it would have like helped me to understand why all of this shit is doing.
We salute you. Thank you for your bravery. Ms. Penny Fair.
Hello. First, I say thank you to you guys for taking this difficult issue on, because I was a graduate here of Wood River High School in 1982, and it was called Meet Me for High in 1982. And it's 2015, and it's still called that, and I'm so anxious for a change. Is there anything? I think some people have said, why are we rushing into this? What's the urgency? Well, I can tell you the urgency is that there are a lot of children that need support in this valley. And I don't encourage you to just jump at a program because it's the one that's put before you. But if it's vetted out and is shown to be useful and successful, it's so important to get it going. I mean, I can only talk to you guys as a passionate, concerned mom. I'm not a therapist. I don't work in the drug court. I can only tell you that I'm very involved with what happens with students in our schools, and I think it's really a true issue that is impeding them succeeding in their life. Earlier today, my friend walked out because she was very distraught. She's had a really bad day. And she would have liked to have the opportunity to speak at that time. I don't think she understood the flow of the meeting. That's to be another day. But what she would have said to you is that if there would have been something in 6th grade, in 7th grade, in 8th grade, in 9th grade, and now in 10th grade, if there would have been something for her child, she would not be having as bad a day as she's having today. So it's time. There is urgency to get it done. Along with that, the culture change that we need at Wood River High School is bigger than just drugs and alcohol. Kids at Wood River High School need to have a pride of belonging to something. If they're proud of where they are and what they do, their level of risk depletes greatly. So I'm hoping that in the very, very near future, we have a pride in our students, that they are proud to be Wolverines and not proud to be weed reefer anymore. I hope that goes away forever.
1 minute, Penny.
Oh, shoot. Let's see. So I hear some concerns about that we won't have enough students for this program. And I don't know if we will or not. But my layperson's view as a parent of 3 kids at Wood River High School is that the current situation is that teachers, staff, and parents are reluctant to get their kids help, are reluctant to say this child is having a problem with drugs and alcohol, because what they're given is expulsion. We need something. We need something that helps them before they're getting thrown out. And I really think that our teachers and staff and parents we're going to be so much more open to saying, my kid needs some help, because they're going to get some help instead of just, thanks for coming, see ya, try it somewhere else. So I really, really encourage you guys. I know it takes a lot of time. You got to listen to everybody, and I'm glad that you're getting input from a lot of qualified people take their information, synthesize it, and do something, because we're tired of talking about it. Do it. Get something to happen so we can help our kids.
Ms. Debbie Gutman.
My name is Debbie Gutnick, and I'm not speaking to you tonight as Director of Student Services. I'm speaking to you as a parent. That parent that left, that Penny talked about, I am that parent 20 years later. I am a parent of a son with a drug addiction. This is not an easy thing to talk about, to admit. I know firsthand the heartache that I have experienced, that my family has experienced, that my son has experienced. I also know there's no silver bullet. No single one program works for all students all the time. I dream of what his life would have been like if he were in a district with a board that cared about students the way you do. You care about students when they have special needs. You allow the voice programs to start. You care about students who take AP. You are interested in having those kids that only have 5 kids in the class, and you want those to continue on. I know you care about kids that have drug issues. If my son would have had the opportunity that is before the board, I believe his life would have been different today. And I applaud you for taking the time to consider this. I applaud you for giving us the opportunity to create a program, to reevaluate a program as it moves and grows, and to make something that's going to work for our kids.
Mr. Michael David.
That one. My name is Michael David. I'm the Executive Director of the Drug Coalition. We're a nonprofit in this community with a mission of decreasing substance use by the youth in Blaine County through innovative programming, through education and awareness, and through positive policy change and environmental change. And I think we were awarded a DFC grant, which is a Drug-Free Communities grant, federal grant. We're in year 5 of that 10-year grant. And the purpose of that grant is to change the environment in our community and to change the culture. And there's been a lot of talk about that this evening, and it is very important. The DFC grant requires that a coalition be made up of 12 sectors in your community, and those sectors, I'm not going to mention all 12, but they work together to change the environment surrounding availability, surrounding social norms, surrounding access to substances. And we've had awesome participation since 2007 when the coalition was started, from probation, from law enforcement, from government, and school district is now stepping up in that respect. And it's not any one organization or group's job to change the culture. It's all of our jobs. And this program is an incredible step, and I want to thank you for taking the courage and using the courage to move this direction. We talked about the numbers. I think the fact that this is referrals from all over is a very positive kind of a shift, at least in terms of how it's being described. I want to take a moment to talk about the problem that Dan McGee mentioned, and because I think this is beyond just the people that are offending. I'll quickly go through these stats. This is from the 2014 Youth Prevention Survey. Not all, but students across the state were surveyed and students in Blaine County were surveyed. To answer the question, have you used prescription medicines non-medically in your lifetime? The Idaho 12th graders, 6%. Blaine County 10th graders, 23%. Blaine County 12th graders, 30%. Have you been in a car driven by someone who had been drinking or using drugs in the past 30 days? Idaho 12th graders, 23%. Blaine County 10th graders, 32%. And 12th graders, 43%. Have you driven after drinking or using drugs yourself in the past 30 days? Idaho 12th graders, 13%. The Blaine County 10th graders were 9%. They were lower, but they don't have driver's license, all of them. Blaine County 12th grade, 27%, so over double Idaho's average. Percentages of cigarette use in the past 30 days. We got 16% for Idaho 12th graders and 19% for Blaine County 12th graders. Smokeless tobacco, 12% in Idaho, 18% in Blaine County. Beer in the past 30 days, 28% for Idaho 12th graders, 47% for Blaine County 12th graders. Liquor in the past 30 days, 27% for Idaho 12th graders and 46% for Blaine County 12th graders. Marijuana in the past 30 days, 17% and 38%. I'm going to stop with those for a second. I think that you see the pattern. We're much higher than the state and national average. I think this program, while again requiring accountability for the behavior, it also treats the substance use as a health issue, and that's what's key to this, and a health issue that requires some level of treatment and an assessment. Is a first attempt at moving away from the moral failing approach to substance use that has been prevalent in our community and in our culture. Instead, you are providing, wrapping a care team around the student and their family. The student will no longer be thrown to the curb, oftentimes without any family support or educational support, and this is and now to not have that scarlet letter of a suspension on their forehead also. As to the time out of the classroom effect, I understand that. I think in a vacuum, and ideally not taking them out of the classroom would be great, but this is a health issue. People miss class because of cancer treatment, because of other things. This is a health issue, and I think that with the support that they can still stick with it, but address the health issue. And I think that this, again, is one piece. This isn't the silver bullet. It's not going to change the culture, but it's a big step towards that. Now, quickly, I want to take my Drug Coalition hat off and talk as a parent. And as a parent of one of those 32 kids who didn't graduate last year because of substance. And I, too, would have given anything for a program like this to see if we could have avoided what happened. So let's get it on the ground and let's get it moving, and then change it and make it as best as we can and customize it for our community. Thank you.
Mr. John Thorson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have little to add for other than what has been said. And quickly would tell you that risky use of addictive substance begins in school. It didn't start with mom at home. It starts in the school. The risky use of substance is a continuum from the one-time user all the way to the unmanaged chronic user who can't control his intake. Up until this time, there's been a disconnect, an unintentional disconnect between what the students do academically and student life that is being addressed by this program. The last thing I want to say is that the statistics are that 40 million Americans are addicted. 80 million additional Americans abuse substances. from the age of 12 and up. We have numbers, this is from the best study I've ever been able to find on this, from the Columbia University Center for Addiction and Substance Abuse, put together by at least 50 researchers, well documented. The other thing that they have stated is as follows: screening, intervention, directed education are effective for substance abusers. We currently don't have that. A program's been presented to you that will start that. I don't know whether it's a perfect program. I don't know whether it's the best program. It's a start. It's been well researched. It's done elsewhere. If one is concerned about stepping up and changing the total culture, I'll just take you back to the days when I was in school, many, many years ago, where everybody smoked. That was the culture. It's taken 50 years for the culture to change so that when you want to smoke, you have to step outside the restaurant, go around the corner, and stand in the alley. That's a cultural change. It isn't done by working on cultural change. It's done by putting programs such as this into place. I've heard stories about the expense. I mean, listen to Michael David's numbers and compare them with the 7. I will tell you that my only critique of this program is that there is 1.5 FTEs instead of 2. I think you need a you're going to need a full-time drug and alcohol counselor on premises, and that person is going to be worked.
1 minute.
You know, and speaking to expense, there isn't one of us in this room that doesn't have the same experience as any parent in here. So, all you have to do is, why is one life worth? What's one prevented suicide worth? What's the value of my son-in-law having had a program like this? It's immeasurable. It's going to take some courage to put it in place. Courage is not attended without trepidation, but it requires courage and stepping up to do it. And I would strongly advise you as a parent and a citizen of this community to move forward with the program. Thank you very much for your time.
Ms. Kate Barnes.
I just wondered, I was speaking about class size, so has everyone
That's all the ones about the ASAP program I've received as of yet, so.
Okay.
Would you please?
I'm back again, because I spoke to you before about class sizes and the impact on students, and I heard you speak tonight about eliminating the bottom part of that, the bottom part of this policy, and that was one of the things I was going to ask about when I was here. You asked about eliminating that recommendation that you eliminate classes if it's fewer than 15 students. And I was wanting to talk to you about that, not coming from a high school perspective, but from an elementary perspective. Because it's easy to say that maybe if you have fewer than 15 students, you should eliminate a teaching position. But the reality of it is absolutely different. First of all, if it meant that you had 14 and 14, that means you combine them with 28. And you have 28 students in an elementary setting, and it's an untenable teaching situation, and it doesn't have long-lasting benefits to those kids. In fact, it has really detrimental effects on those kids. And Also, the thing about looking at class sizes, just from a numbers perspective, is that you don't know what the composition of those classes are. You might have a class, and it might on paper look okay because it has maybe 23 kids. But if you look at the composition of that class, you may have 4 high needs, special needs kind of kids, and you put them in with one teacher, and all the lofty goals that we have in Wayne County for the kind of teaching we want to see done goes right out the window. It absolutely becomes a management kind of a situation. But also, I want to come back, well, this is ironic because I have just one thing that I was going to read. And it's from an article about myths in education. And the one myth that I was bringing was class size doesn't matter is a myth. Can I read this other one because it speaks to what Mr. Thorson just said? He said that the program, the ASAP program that you are contemplating, he said it's well researched because it's done elsewhere, but this myth number 4 says a successful program works everywhere. It said there's significant evidence against the idea that a program successful in one school or district should be imported elsewhere and expected to work well. Context is the key variable. Programs must be related to the makeup of the school district and or the specific school. Approaches to education that are marketed for one district may be excellent, yet totally inappropriate for some districts. A program has to fit the specific needs of the schools and classrooms in the district, and a careful needs assessment coupled with a thorough examination should determine whether to adopt a program, not the success of the program elsewhere. So I think that was ironic but appropriate for your analysis of ASAP for us. Anyway.
1 minute.
Oops. Oh, now I'm completely lost. But I know that class sizes in elementary schools are being affected radically by cutting the number of teachers. And I think that Blaine County prides itself on the amazing education that we give. And I can tell you that if you start making those class sizes, even as high as in this recommended policy, where it says you could go to 25 students in the 3rd grade, it will be radically affected negatively. And to do it by the numbers without looking at the composition of the classroom is a travesty. I know you're worried about the general fund, the bottom line. I've been on the school board before, and it's a big concern. But 3 out of the top things on the surveys that came back, 3 of the top 8 things that people requested and said was important to them over all of the things for the class size to be small and remain small. And so to look at the overall picture of what people in the district want, but to ignore that, I think it's just to ignore the genuine wishes of our whole community. And I know that if we have to, that other districts cut other areas before they cut classroom teachers. And it could be done in Wayne County too, if it comes down to preserving that general fund by making some cuts. And I really ask and recommend that you look at the places first. And the other thing I point out in policies is it says that it recommends that when the subject area average class size gets below a certain number, that a teacher or a paraprofessional be reassigned. But that doesn't give us any leeway to do that. It says reassigned, but if you have a school that has no extra paraprofessionals or extra teachers, it's impossible. So it makes it absolutely impossible to follow that policy.
Time.
Thanks.
Ms. Tracy Atwood.
Hi. My name is Tracy Atwell, and I've been in the district for 28 years at the elementary school, and I'm going to read you a letter that I wrote. It saddens me to see what's going on in our school district. I sincerely challenge the way the strategic planning process is being implemented. When we gave our input, we were allowed 7 or 8 minutes per topic to write our beliefs. These were merely phrases about what a teacher etc. looks like. Administrators were not included even though they are vital to our district. These phrases were decontextualized, stripped bare of any philosophy on the subject, devoid of detail, emotion, or substance. We never had a chance to have an in-depth conversation or real input about the future of our district. Then, most of us weren't invited to be part of the continued process. How is that democratic? The process feels like an agenda is being pushed, and it does not fully represent what many of us believe and know about education. Furthermore, there is a person heading a committee who pushed her agenda last time we went through the strategic planning process. She disregarded what many of the people on the committee wanted to recommend. It was so bad that I took my name off the document, and several other teachers had serious concerns regarding the outcome too. I recommend slowing this process down and starting over with an independent agency. The other issue is that of class size. In the 28 years I have been in the district, teachers' responsibilities have only increased. With class sizes being low, I have been able to keep up with my responsibilities. When I did have 25 students in the past, we weren't doing mileposts yet, RTI, interventions for all students, Common Core, and PBLs. I figured that when I had that big class, I would just have to work another hour every day to keep up, and that's what I did. I had a great year, but I have to admit that at the end of the year, I felt I didn't meet all of my students' needs as well as I wanted to. I felt like the kids who were in the middle didn't get the attention I wanted to give them. What feels wrong with what is going on is that we, the teachers and students, are being referred to as numbers. Children are not numbers, and we have children in this district who have some serious needs. Think about Haley Elementary. Those teachers are looking at around 23 students in their class. Well, 23 students without issues would be just fine. But you have the base program there and the ASD kids. Then you add kids with IEPs, ADD, ADHD, emotional issues, on, and the class of 23 is going to feel like a class of 35. There needs to be some balance to the classes that have kids with special needs in them. I would count a kid on the spectrum as about 4 students. A kid with emotional issues is 3. I'm sure you see my point. Not all kids count as 1 in the load of the teacher. When I started this year with 14 students, I thought it was crazy, but it turned out to be a great opportunity for me because I was able to pursue my consulting teacher's endorsement for mathematics. And I took 2 classes this semester and 1 last semester, and I never would have done that if I had a large class. And that's enabled me to better serve my school and the math committee that I'm on. But even more important than my continued education, which I'm very fortunate that I have an opportunity to do that this semester, is the influence of small class sizes on the students. I know exactly where all of my students are in all subjects. I can differentiate for them, and they've all made significant growth because the attention the district has afforded them. But much of what they've gained cannot be measured on a test. Their growth is emotional as well as academic because they are given so much individualized attention. The district always emphasized the patron's desire for low class sizes. What's happening to this emphasis? Is it fiscal or philosophical? It feels very different from what it's been in the past. Do we not value low class sizes anymore? And for many years, patrons have been attracted to this district because of low class sizes. I know that the parents, my students, appreciate that their children's needs are met because I'm not stretched too thin. I still have to work many extra hours, even with a small class. Please let the patrons know what you value. Unfortunately, it sounds like you're saying that the specialized education we are able to provide our students with low classes is no longer a priority. With the current demands placed on teachers, I urge you not to think of children as numbers and balance the loads teachers will be taking on, given the nature of the children that will be in their classes. Thank you.
All right, that's all the public comments. Forms I have filled out. I will have the courtesy proceed and ask if there's any others.
I'd like to.
And if you would, please make sure you get one filled out.
Thank you, Board. My name is Fritz Peters. I am speaking as a principal, and I live on 430 Whitetail in Haiti. So let's review. This is kind of rushed, but there's a need for the rush too. So that's a juxtaposition that you're dealing with right now, and I think your seats right now are pretty hot. The first thing that I see is that the policy needs to be changed. That's what I keep hearing. Because even as we go to our meetings with you, I know you don't like to enforce that policy as it's written, because it's pretty tough on kids. Secondly, everything that I've ever read or heard about addiction and substance abuse problems is that prevention is one of the keys. From 7th grade to 8th grade, when they come back to 8th grade after that summer, is when I see the biggest problems with our kids. And I would love to see a full-time drug and alcohol counselor hired in this district. And I mean full-time. Because that's what our kids need. They don't need a week. They don't need a spirit program. They don't need to be expelled. What they need is education, and they need care. And our counselors and social worker right now are absolutely maxed out. They're losing time with kids because they have so much to do in terms of scheduling and so many other programs. So I would ask that we move forward with that drug and alcohol counselor, because prevention to me is the most important thing that we can start doing, and it should start as early as 6th grade, if not even earlier. In terms of a program, look how much it's changed since the last board meeting. You're not going to buy a program and then say this is what it looks like. It will change every single year. We're not stupid people in this county. We're smart people. There's a lot of smart people here, and I really want to commend Dan for all the work he's done in even changing the program just since the first proposal. It's a proposal, and then in 2 weeks' time, it's a completely different proposal with a lot more flexibility. Should we treat a cigarette instance with a cigarette the same as a kid who is bringing massive amounts of drugs to school to sell? I don't think so. The key that we have to work on in this community, first and foremost, is to get the drugs out of the school. And this is not a school issue, and I disagree that the drug issue starts in schools. I think it can be exacerbated in schools, but we have to stop thinking of this as a school issue. The schools, if anything, have been pretty strict about this. There's other communities that have drug testing. Other programs here in the school, like the hockey team and the ski team. If we want to go down that route, that will be a big battle too. But that's something to consider. I don't know if that's appropriate for our community. But the first and foremost thing I think we should be looking at is assistance and having a counselor on board to help kids. And then I would love to see, even my own teachers are really frustrated sometimes when a kid has gone out of school for a long period of time. But if a kid is coming to school stoned every day, being in class doesn't matter. Algebra does not matter anymore. I'm sorry. What matters with a kid that's going to some place and getting stoned and coming back after lunch, or coming to school stoned, that's a bigger problem, and they need immediate help. And I think that should be our focus. But I think we should also be focusing on a community-wide effort, because right now, ask my social worker, ask our counselors, ask any administrator, we have less services in this community now than we did 10, even 12 years ago. We had a lot more services back then. So this is a tough, tough job you guys have, but I encourage you to move forward with something, because Penny Thayer's grandchildren will still be hearing the same thing if we don't start doing something. The numbers are staggering, and they're appalling, and we are spinning our wheels. So I think we need to move forward with something, and then that program needs to be adapted and looked at and changed every single year to tweak it and make it a better program. Thank you.
Any further public comment? Okay. Trustee Schwab?
I just
just wanted to say, going back to the last topic, Tracy and Kate, I hear loud and clear what you're saying. I think that there's, in my mind, there's three major things that are components of great education. First is fantastic teachers with no exceptions. Consistently fantastic teachers. The second thing is strong teacher-student relationships. And when we talk about class size, really that's what, in my mind, is the underlying thing that we're talking about. So that, to me, is an incredibly huge part of a strong education. And a strong education will not exist without that. The third thing that I think defines a fantastic education is programs, features, services that agree with the values of the community. And getting back to Tracy's point about the strategic plan, I am very much hoping that that results in something like that. I'm watching with open eyes to see if that's the case, because I feel like I know about those values in the community, and I want to see that those values are represented in the final product. So I wanted to say thanks for your comments.
Trustee Baker.
I think I would like to hear from the board kind of a summary of what we're expecting from the next board meeting with regard to the input we received and the presentation we received about kind of what the next steps would be. Speaking on the ASAP program, Fred's kind of stole my summary, because I have listed here things that I think are important to address, to look at for the next board meeting. Number one, a policy revision. And I think that's going to be key in anything that we do moving forward. And in the past, we've assigned task force that had people in the community, parents, educators involved with looking at policy when it's a dramatic change like the wellness policy. And I think this one should have that level of attention. The second thing I said was, and we talked about this a couple of times, and I have myself, addressing the culture and the connections and starting in prevention and looking at whether it's restorative practice or some other way, but bringing that down to those formative years before the kids get to the point of needing ASAP. And I think that that's something that's going to be essential moving forward, and it's possible that this could be fleshed out in goal number 4, but if it's not, it still should be done. If that's not where that direction happens to go with looking at the strategic plan. And the third thing I had was, I feel that ASAP is a great place to start, especially with a lot of the revisions that were done, even just in the past 2 weeks. And you know, with the change in the participation allowance, with people being able to self-refer, you know, the screening requirements, the flexibility that's involved, I think one of the most important things that I heard said a couple of times, and I agree with this wholeheartedly, is that this needs to be a dynamic program that can change as it's being implemented and adjust to the circumstances and the needs of the students. And I think it was going to require very strong oversight to ensure that accountability that that program is meeting the needs of the students and has that flexibility built into it as we move forward. So that's my summary of ASAP.
Okay. Any other comments from the board about ASAP?
I didn't come to as many conclusions as Kathy, but it seems like, listening to all the different comments tonight, that we've got 2 different things going on here. We need to change our culture in the whole school district. You know, starting young with preventative programs, and then change the culture in the middle school, and definitely change the culture in high school. So that's one thing. And then we have the second part is, it seems that there's a need to help kids with addiction issues. And so I feel like, and maybe I'm simplifying it too much, but kids that really need to go through 5 days, 10 days, 15 days, that need that have substance abuse issues, that have dual diagnosis. So we've got, I guess, 2 different components here that need to be addressed. And I agree, we need to look at a policy revision, and Teresa Espedal was talking about how there's a lot of different model policies out there that aren't, black and white, and there might be options out there. So I think that's something that we should be looking at, are some different model policies. I don't know where they are. I don't know what school districts have them. Maybe we can have some help with that. And I don't think it's just throwing it to the policy committee, John, to have them search that out.
Yeah, so that's why I thought a task force would be
Yeah,
really
but,
important.
and I don't, we've had this policy, let's get the right, let's look at some different options here for different policies. We don't need to reinvent the wheel if there's some districts out there that have some great different discipline policies.
Well,
So,
and if I could remind the board that in the memo outlining our proposal for ASAP after discussion for the memo from the last board meeting, that was basically tonight's PowerPoint again. There are some recommendations in there about immediate policy changes that would be needed to even make the ASAP program not being in violation of policy. So that's something you can do immediately while you are working on the more long-range stuff. And also, I'm looking at Angie because I'm going to watch to see if she has a heart attack, because she's working with Dan on the committee that is working on the prevention half. And I know their plan was to have a proposal to the board in June with approval in July. And so moving it up is going to just do what? Give you a heart attack? Is it going to be sloppy?
Fewer
Do you need the
details.
time?
Fewer details. We're going to have to write a lot of the curriculum, which isn't going to be done until summer because of where we're at in our year. So those details probably wouldn't even be ready even for the June meeting. We could give an overall summary of the work so far and present what we have, if you'd like to, for the next board meeting.
I think also another big factor in this is the principal, who is not yet principal, but the new candidate and arrival here. One of the strong things that Penny was part of the committee that day. One of the things that was very clear in his interview was his record on changing school culture to a culture where kids have each other's back and care about each other. And that was a big part of the committee's going with him.
I guess the other thing I would just like to touch base on, which was talked about by a few comments here from the community, and that's different restorative practices. And I don't know if that's part of maybe of a curriculum, or if that's something that the principal looks into, if that's something that we look into. And I think, talking to you, that you had started out in your old school district, with one grade level, with a 9th grade, and then it moves up from there. But maybe that's something that we need to look into.
It is the social emotional curriculum.
The social emotional curriculum, so maybe
because
that's
you have to build the capacity, and that is what earlier in having that conversation around it. It's a great program. But if you want to address kids who are having substance abuse issues right now, you have to build the groundwork. So we're a year out from being able to use that. So how do we put the fly in the plane while you're building it, type of thing? How do you help these kids right now while you're building the culture over here? As I said at the beginning of my presentation, it would be wonderful if down the road the intervention piece becomes much less because of the fact that our kids have each other's back and are saying, this is the way we live our lives that we're living.
But it seems like we could do something simultaneously, I guess.
No,
I guess that's what we're
what
talking about.
social emotional preventative piece will come back, and that could be the recommendation, it could be something else, because we're looking at everything that's out there in the social emotional world.
Trustee Short?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think Chris Stouffer had some really important things to say about that aspect of the program, which is that it can't be kind of a very clinical situation where you have the silos of the adults here and the silos of the kids here. It has to be a place where you can create genuine relationships. Often that does not happen in the classroom. You have to have other programs, whether they be outdoor programs or something like that, that allows that to happen. So I think that we need to look at that as being the basis of it, instead of a program that we're going to pull off of a shelf to magically create relationships.
Trustee Baker?
Just kind of in closing on this topic, for me was, I want to thank the board for indulging my request to do this workshop, because I think that the information that we gained here was vital for understanding, you know, the goals, how this is going to work, and, you know, most importantly, I feel like the professionals and the experts in these fields that came here and spoke tonight, I can't thank them enough for bringing that foresight or their insight into the issue. And please sign up for the task force on policy revision.
Okay, I have one more. So at our last board, it was 2 months ago, there was the initial presentation that Dan had given about what a typical day would look like, and a lot more specifics about the program. Is that what we would be voting on at the next meeting? I'm still a little bit unclear about actually what the program is.
Okay.
I mean, you know, because if that's not the program, so then I know it's got individual counseling, it's got group counseling in it. You know, I had sort of added up the academic time in that, and we had talked about that.
It is a full-day program.
Right.
It could well be that half of the day is academics, half of the day is working on the social emotional issues, the making good choices, those kinds of things, or as Michael David was saying, on the health aspect. I'm hemming and hawing because of the fact that when we put something out here with a very specific, this is the way it's going to be, then we get accused of one size fits all. And we're really trying to say, this is just a mental model for you to wrap your brain around as you try to think about it. And it's going to be varied all along the continuum, depending on the kid's situation. If it's the situation we have today, where there's distributing going on, it's going to be very different than the kid who went to lunch with a friend who tried something else.
Right. Okay, so that, what was presented to us, isn't what we would be approving.
No, you would be approving the memo that you got from me at the last board meeting.
Okay, which was
the PowerPoint presentation.
Right, but it didn't really outline the day. It didn't.
No. I can outline a day for you, just like I can outline 10 days for you, and say this is a possible mental model for you to wrap your mind around. But it's not the one and only way, okay?
So what accountability measures or reporting measures are going to be put in place so that if we're kind of, really we're approving a concept with hiring a specialist.
Mental health therapist.
And what's the accountability back? Because I do think that that oversight piece is going to be an important part of what are they doing, what is the effect, what are the measures that are going to be developed to see that we're moving in the right direction and that we're not just kind of spinning with.
All right, there's measures listed in here. A reduction in the number of suspensions related to substance abuse, a reduction in the number of students identified for intervention and or discipline at the school for repeat substance abuse, increased graduation rate, and reduction of the number of dropouts with substance abuse issues, a reduction in the number of parents reporting concerns about substance abuse among students. That's the yearly climate survey piece that happens. And you could certainly have the purview to say that we want every 6 months a report on the number of students served, what are the accomplishments, those kinds of things. But these are the progress measures that we are proposing.
I think waiting till the end of the year would be too long. And these measures are more after a year, you know. So what would be the interim measures as far as, if this is more undefined, which I'm okay with, but as it gets moving along, having some kind of reporting back to say,
here's where we are.
Here's where we are.
We've had
Check-ins.
This is many participants.
Yeah, and this is what we're doing, and this is what we started with, this is where we're moving towards, this is what we want to morph to, you know, having that oversight clearly defined with specific reporting would be better than, I mean, these are very important, but that's, you know, a year off, and,
Yep, all right. We can amend the memo to include some, or do you want 6 months? I would recommend at least the first report be 6 months.
6 months and then maybe a middle one before the end of it, before June. So 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, maybe?
If you're looking at 6 months, you start in September, October, November, December.
Well, is it going to be
January,
starting in
February.
September? Because if we're hiring the person now, they're going to be looking at data, meeting with teachers and administrators, and they might have, I mean, Dan had all these changes in 2 weeks based on feedback that he got. So if you're having professional hired in July, there may be revisions by the beginning of school that are recommended based on this person's level of experience.
Are you available this summer for? Sharma, are you
Yeah.
available?
Yeah, no.
Or August, I mean, I don't know what kind of timeline there is.
No, but I think 6 months is doable. 6 months at least until where they are. And, right on.
I just want to make, is Fritz still here? I liked your comment about we're not stupid and we can, this is a flexible thing. I like that a
did the
lot.
whole community.
Because I can see this program, which is now, in my mind, quite rigid, morphing into something that would be more amenable to our community and have some aspects that possibly Eric people would have input on, Judge Ingram would have, Teresa would have input on, and that's my hope actually down the road. Although I'm not saying the programs throw it out the window. What I'm saying is it's a nice place to start to answer community needs. Now we can, you know, nothing's etched in stone. Everything's dynamic from here on.
All right. We concluded the discussion on the adolescent substance abuse program. And it is ordered that the board will desire to get back to policy 602.12.
I think for a few minutes. Yeah, I would agree.
Open that up for discussions.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone
for your
time.
time.
Thank you for your help.
Yeah, it was a great discussion.
Okay. 602.12. Open for discussion.
Thanks for coming, Julie. Catherine, do you want to pick up where you were?
Okay, I actually think I remember, Keith was talking about, looking at other opportunities for the BC calculus class being taught, and about looking outside to CSI, and having Amy facilitate, an online class, and I guess I don't understand that because she is she could be teaching college calculus. I don't know why you know, why not have her teach the class? And if she's going to have 20 kids or 18 kids, you know, the next year, it behooves her to continue teaching that
to be up on her BC calculus. And if she's going to be facilitating the class, she might as well be teaching the class. So I guess, I don't know if you have any.
Can I ask for some clarification? Are we discussing a particular class, or are we
No.
discussing a policy around how we give guidance to our buildings on assigning teachers?
Yeah, that's a good point.
You know, because as they were talking earlier, you know, there are multiple factors
Yeah.
here. And I can make assignments, you can make assignments, we can all make assignments, but they're the ones that live it every day and understand the, like Keith was talking about, the class sizes that are happening in algebra and geometry and stuff like that, and how do you balance all of it? You know, if you want to have some recommendations in here about we value AP classes and go to the ultimate length to try to make them happen, you know, that's a policy piece. When you're starting to talk about what teachers teaching what, you're running the school.
Well, you know what, that's a very good point. I appreciate that.
I think that.
No, that's okay.
I think
no,
the
appreciate
example
that.
of the BC is just to make the point of what you're saying. It's, the issue is what you're describing, as far as what are the values of the board, where do we want our resources to follow, and what do we want to ensure stays pure and doesn't get diluted because it's that important. The example of BC Calc, it's just an example that is being used to talk about it, because there's different levels. I mean, there's random offerings of courses, there's the AP and dual credit, and those are, I believe the board values those differently. And I think that if it's a funding issue, and if it's a resource issue, then that's where the board does come into play, because if we need to ensure that the funding is there so that these classes can exist in the best way possible for students to be successful, then that's where we need to make sure that that happens at a funding and a policy. And so I do like your suggestion of looking at this policy to ensure that that is a priority, if that's what the board feels is a priority, to ensure that. And not have to get into the weeds of making sure that it happens, but we certainly can use the BC Calc as a good example of a concern that we would have of why are we going to an online course offering so she can sit in a study hall or a past class, whatever you want to call it, and facilitate, you know, 15 kids who are in there while she's trying to proctor while these other kids are in the back of the room trying to do an online class. I mean, that's my understanding of how that would work. Is that correct?
Right now, she's teaching all math. She's not teaching past. Is that correct?
Well, we had the option of BC Calc, and we're still waiting to hear if there's an ideal option, whether it's past class or the SAT prep that combined together. We're just trying to, because the other teachers were able to come up with some ideas, and no idea what they come up with.
So that's a possibility, that it would be while she's teaching something else, that she would be doing this as an online. And if it's a resource issue, then that's where the board can have a say as far as funding those kinds of positions and adjusting policy to ensure that that is a priority over other issues. And so I think that's kind of where we sit with that. And I just think it's really important. Like Rob said, it's our fighter pilots, and you need that continuity, because if they're not offering in a year because they didn't make the number, or you got to do it in a really creative way, you know, is she going to be as effective the following year because it was a hodgepodge one year because you only had 4, but you got 20 coming in the next year, as an example.
And let me remind the board too, that in the proposed budget as it stands right now, there is a reserve teacher, and that is for this very reason, that wherever it happens, that we need to add an additional resource.
And if we had more than one necessity for a reserve, then it would
come
be
back to you to ask for more FTE.
Which would go into our reserve.
Correct.
Basically, we would be have to
increasing our budget.
amending the budget to increase the budget to allow for additional FTE, which we have that purview at any time.
We wouldn't actually have to do that because we do have our contingency, because I spoke to Mike about this. We have our contingency fund that we haven't used almost ever in the past several years at like 2.3 million or something that just rolls forward. And so that's where that funding would come from, but again, it's still gonna affect the amount that rolls forward, so you're going to be dipping into your reserve with, but you don't actually
It's a
have to.
finite
adjust your-
amount.
Yeah, you don't actually have to adjust your policy or your budget in order to do that, but
But by every addition we make now,
Right.
means we're gonna be out in front of the taxpayers.
that much sooner, which is a concern of mine.
Additional levy that much sooner.
Is just assuring that
It's a concern that the board shares this as an entirety, I believe.
what our priorities are. And if the board feels that our priorities are to make sure these courses are continued in the best, presented in the best form possible and not being forced to be creative and sacrificing the quality of that offering. That's my concern. Is that we can be creative, but is that really where we should be creative, or should we be creative somewhere else in our budget or in our staffing assignments, so that those can stay in the best format possible?
Well, and I think we have some pretty clear direction and discussion from the board that we all agree. AP, DI, our advanced courses, dual credit courses.
Dual credit.
That's a huge priority of the board, and has been over the past 4 or 5 years, in the addition of more courses. I think it behooves us as well to, along with that, if there can be a creative method and still have a quality product,
Sure.
I think we should try and use that.
Yeah.
If not, I think we need to, and I think we have given clear direction tonight, that we are very interested in embodying on our advanced courses.
And I'd like to just take this moment to compliment both the board and the high school. In fact, we haven't even gotten this out yet today, but I was conniving with the high school administration today of having the entire high school staff over to my house for lunch on day-to-day to thank them, because we have created our own problem. And that's a good problem to have, because our teachers in especially the departments of science, social studies, and English language arts have been out recruiting kids who show a spark, who show an inclination, but don't see themselves as advanced opportunity kids to take these classes. And so between our secondary numbers rising and already pushing more resources to the secondary anyway, and having more students sign up for these classes, it's putting pressure on the system, but it's good pressure, and it's because of the community's commitment to it. And I'm over the moon that we have big math classes coming along. We have 2 AP physics classes next year. We're getting close to having 2 AP psych classes, if I'm speaking correctly.
We have 2 right now.
We have 2, so the enrollment has gotten high enough. So those are good problems to have, but it also keeps us from creating classes of, I don't want us to create classes of 35, AP classes of 35 students like we've had this year. That's not acceptable for any class.
Well, going back to point 4 on this particular policy, I think that as it's written, it could be interpreted very differently. And I would really like to see that language change, because it's a recommendation that if it's below 15, that it be eliminated or transferred or released. And you made a suggestion about having some other,
the board
yes,
values AP, dual credit, those advanced
Yeah.
class opportunities.
So if we can get some yeah, would it, yes, and I think that if you can bring some language forward.
Given the autonomy to.
Yes, to have some, a starting point, some language forward as a starting point to address that. I mean, I think the board has all indicated that that's a direction that we all agree on. And by having this either removed and replaced or changed with additional language, something that's to that effect, that we can then discuss at our next board meeting.
Point of clarification, are you just referring with number 4 to advanced opportunities, or going back to all classes across the district?
Well, I think tonight, for this point, we talked about advanced opportunity coursework.
I understand, but we also had public comment about the others.
Well, I think that would be addressed in one of the other 3.
Yeah, I would agree with that. This number 4 is addressed in 1, 2, or 3. Because this talks about if there's,
less than 15, a staff member position is going to be eliminated. But if, and I think we should talk about these a little bit too, but I think that is addressed in there. And there might be, on the other hand, that might be.
I gotta bring some things up, because I've done scheduling for 15 years over there. That master schedule, especially at the high school, when I was there, we had 132 singletons, and APs was creating more singletons. I know that the high school's gotta have at least 100, and maybe more, but I can tell you, this is gonna be a singleton class.
You want to define the singletons?
A singleton means it's a class that only has so many kids that have signed up for it, so it only constitutes one period of the day. It can only be offered one time during the day. And you gotta find that one time where all of those kids can take it and it doesn't conflict with everything else they wanna take. Okay, so now you've got 4 kids signed up for this class. And the matrix hasn't been run yet. You don't even know if those 4 kids can take the class yet. So that's your maximum number. You could be down to 2 as soon as they run that matrix. And keep in mind, something we've done in the past when we've had single kids or 2 kids that have surpassed our curriculum. They've gone past our available math. We've offered college courses to them through Johns Hopkins, through Stanford, through University of Oregon, and it's a whole lot cheaper to help pay for their college credit than to hire a teacher and benefit them or whatever it takes. I think there are creative options. The problem that you run into is that what you're talking about right now with this math class, I just asked Keith, they haven't even run the complex matrix yet. And so there's so many variables in this thing, it's crazy. You really don't even know what you've got yet. And so that's part of the problem. You got a panic teacher here, and I worry about that because you're setting policy that's going to affect everything. If we adjust based on 4 kids without a complex matrix, and then you're going to have to take that teacher, that math teacher, away from one of the other math sections. So that means it's going to drive one of those other sections up. That's the point, is that if you really believe in class size, do you want Algebra 1 classes with kids who really need that Algebra 1 and understand it fully? Do you want them at 30 so you can have a class of 4?
No, that's the point we were talking about, is that that's where the board's job is going to be to assign or allow for resources through budgeting to make sure that doesn't happen. Because that's not what we want as a side effect either.
Let me just check my understanding. What I think I've been tasked with is to create a statement that would be 0.5 or something on here that says that the board values advanced opportunities such as AP, dual credit, DI, and will work to provide every opportunity to facilitate these classes. If there's a conflict matrix and the kids can't even take it because they have to make a choice between 2 classes, there's a conflict.
Maybe there's a choice between AP Chemistry and AP Calc. You don't know that yet.
But we're making an effort to provide the class if they can take it. If they can't take it, that's...
Yeah.
And without saying, this is the way you have to do it, administrator, because we can't begin to fathom all the complications that are coming in. We're making a value statement.
Did Carol Freund and Leslie and that whole group, like 5-6 years ago, I think that that might have come up. All of this discussion might have come up before. I'd love to know, like,
In academic council.
Yeah, in admin council. And
Academic council.
Or academic, sorry.
We still had discussion around a minimum class size. We did drop it below 15. We ran classes smaller than 15 because it gave me the discretion not to recommend based on the FTE that I had available to me at the time. And so it was, I had the sections there. We were on a trimester program at the time, so I had 126 more sections in the schedule. So it allowed me that FTE to be able to put those people in those spots. So that's why we were offering 16 sections per semester. So it was a different world for me.
Yeah. I know that day that Carol said, we talked about this for a long time.
Look, I have a
class of 10 for geometry, but I'm not cutting it. I have classes of 12, like probably 6 or 7 of them that are intervention classes, but we don't cut them. So it just does say recommended.
Yeah.
So it,
The
you
way
know.
the policy's written, it gives the administrator the autonomy to figure out and shape their schedule the way they need to fit it in within their own school.
Yeah. Well, and that's good that we say that, because sometimes people take the word recommended as gospel.
I think that, you know, so we have it in here as recommended, but if we just removed it, teachers would still be doing the same thing. And if we came up with, you know, another statement, teachers would still be saying, oh, okay, you know, I need to run this class of 10. Oh, you know, we can combine these 2 classes because it's not going to make an impact. I just think because the 15, if it's in here, it's really going to stick out, and people may take that as
a
gospel.
requirement, not a recommendation.
Right, whereas some people are going to read it differently.
That's why it says recommend.
People might, but it's just read differently.
So it could be interpreted differently.
And when we do our,
Yeah, it's.
Just one more point that I'm a little worried about in policy, that if you take out amendment, then good luck cutting any, or reallocating any staff, period. If I've got 1 in my class, it's legitimate. So if you take out a minimum at all, if there is no standard at all, then that's why I'm saying get ready. Because right now, you've got class sizes in one of our elementaries that are about that. And they're going to go to maybe 17, and you'll have people arguing, why are you taking any teachers away from us? And then you've got teachers at other schools going, well, how come that school's got class sizes of this, and we got class sizes of this? We're trying to move that resource to take care of those problems. But if we don't have a minimum in which to do that, then basically
Takes away your hikes.
you're just adding. Then you just have to add. You're not
Well,
going to be able to reallocate.
And I think to speak to that, the board has been very clear that we're not talking about an elementary class. We're talking
Yeah,
about.
you are.
sorts of-
Grade level.
Well, yes, but that's what it says now, but that's not what we wanted to say. What we were discussing is specifically the guidelines around advanced opportunity courses not being the same consideration as a 3rd grade elementary class or a 2nd grade elementary class. So I think that this speaks very clearly at the elementary level as a guideline, but it doesn't really apply when you're talking if we're going to continue to raise the bar and have those opportunities at the higher level.
That's why you're saying maintain 4, add the additional.
Maintain 4, but you even could change the language so that it's not a broad umbrella over all classes. You're not putting those specialty advanced opportunity courses underneath that umbrella. It has its own point that would not be connected to this. And I think that's what we've been trying to say.
And which is, I believe, what you have understood is to create a value statement for advanced.
Right, that they would not really be subject to
Or a-
point 4.
There'd be a point 5.
Yeah.
Point 5.
That
I'm
would
just
be
gonna-
relevant to point 4.
Throw something else out there that, and actually Fritz mentioned it, he's got some intervention classes with 8 kids in them. What did you say?
12.
12 kids in them. So there may be intervention classes at the high school as well, where you need to have, you know, a class of 12 or a class of 13, that you don't want to combine that with another class. So it's, I guess, you know, there's going to be a lot of discretion at the high school administration level and the middle school administration level.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about, you know.
Both ends of the spectrum.
Exactly.
And that's the whole point, is the schools know the students, they know the situation.
Right.
They know how to best allocate, like, let's go back to the example that we've had several times at the table. On the flip side, at the elementary level, you know, with the concern that I shared with you when I first arrived here, and some 3rd grade teachers concerned about that they had classes of 20, and then one of the 3rd grade classes was 21. So there's 3 classes of 20, 1 class of 21. However, they have some intensive needs students in those classes. So do they need more help? The same school has 4 classes of 5th grade at 17. So if the school has the freedom to use their own resources, they could have 3 classes of 5th grade, still be under the 25, and put a 5th teacher at 3rd grade. They know that. We don't know that because all we see is numbers. We don't see names of kids with lists of all their issues and that kind of stuff. And so we need to give them that flexibility as administrators to allocate their resources the way best serves their situation.
No, Fritz, I wouldn't take your job. It's not worth it to me.
The master schedule is this beast, and that flexibility to do what we have to do and put an emphasis on a class like an AP class for the long term. Because if you cut a class like that for 1 year, that's a low number, you can kill the program, you can really hurt it. So it really, I would just say be cautious with, I think that 5th edition is great because the 4th doesn't really come into play that much for us, but it's also vital when it comes time for negotiations and things like that, where people can argue, hey, look what it says, there's no minimum.
So for the May meeting, we'll have a 5th point under this for proposal. And correct me if I'm wrong on our policy on how to create policy, but we can discuss it, but then it will still have to go to policy committee and then back to us before we technically approve it.
Correct.
Just so we're all in the same understanding. Any further discussion?
Well, we haven't even got to 1, 2, or 3 yet.
We'll try to make it quick, 9 o'clock. So I guess let's start with number 1. And this is just going to be some clarification questions here. It's recommended that when a subject area average class size or grade level average class size reaches 25 students, a certified teacher or full-time parapro be reassigned. So when a class reaches 25, then
it's recommended that we provide them some additional help.
Additional teacher, or a parapro. And that's so that would be 3rd through whatever. 3rd through. I guess that's the question.
Middle school, high school policy?
Well, I read it as
elementary, middle.
Because it says subject area or grade level. I read it as secondary or.
Was that the intent of this policy? John, were you around? Was that the intent of this policy?
That's been around actually before me. It was moved from the master agreement. This used to be in the master agreement, and then under the Luna laws, it was removed in July of 2011. So that's really, it was moved from the master agreement policy. So it actually is under the board review. Before, you would have had to negotiate this with the union.
Yes, because number 2 specifies kinder, 1st or 2nd, so it's implied that anything else.
Jim Lewis did this.
What I would recommend is the addition of 3, 4, 5th, 3rd, 4th, 5th to number 1, and instead of just paraprofessional, be reassigned / or hired, similar to what it is in number 3.
Oh.
I would do the same thing with the 2nd one, or hired, if we don't have the staff to reassign. And then change number 3 to middle or upper or whatever terminology you want to use to distinguish between your K-5 programs and your secondary programs.
So Sean, are you saying that after the comma, a full-time certified teacher be hired or reassigned, that portion be applied to 2 and 3 in those after the comma?
Well, the way it reads in number 3, it says a full-time certified teacher be hired or reassigned. In 1 and 2, it doesn't say hired, it just says reassigned.
Right.
It says
I would
teacher or
just
parapro, so just
give the
stick in
addition
hired
to
in there.
hired in those 2 to make it consistent, and then designate between your secondary school levels, your K2 and your 3, 4, 5.
So that means in number 1, we would take subject area out and just leave it as grade level 3, 4, 5. Is that with?
Basically, yeah.
Can I see nods? straw poll.
But
So-
yeah.
That was the intent, that's the intent.
That's the intent
All
of
right,
that.
so we're gonna
It
just-
seemed like that was the intent, but it just
Specify
wasn't
it.
written that way.
Subject
That was what
area.
was negotiated.
Well, I would also recommend that 2 becomes 1, and 1 becomes 2, so you have kindergarten, first, second, and then you have third, fourth, fifth, and then you have middle school.
I wouldn't want to watch it.
All right, well, I don't know.
All right, I'm reaching my capacity here. One more suggestion is that I'm at.
And so this second part would change. So basically, the threshold is 25 at 345, and it's 20 at these others. As soon as you reach that mark, then you are getting a full-time teacher to be hired or reassigned. And there's not a para portion of it.
Well, in 1 and 2, there's a para portion. Do you got this?
Oh, I thought he was taking the second portion of 3 and just changing 1 and 2 to
Well,
match that.
I think you can keep the teacher or parapro in 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And you leave it like that.
But you insert the hire
But, yeah,
or
you insert the
reassign.
Hire or
because-
reassign.
Reassign.
Because you may not have anybody to reassign.
Exactly.
So 345, as soon as you hit 25, then you would have the opportunity to hire a parapro to be in the classroom with the teacher, or hire another teacher to split a class.
So I guess the other just thing that's, hard, I don't know if it can be put in the policy, but maybe it's just up to, the discretion of the principal, and the principal could, ask for more resources if necessary. It's been brought up by a couple of different people about how classroom makeup, is a big concern, because you may have 18 kids in a class with, 9 of them having different special needs, and then you may have 24 in a class and it works really well. But what I'm worried about is that in schools, you may have to rob Peter to pay Paul.
Personally, I don't think you can craft a policy that will take care of every caveat.
I don't think so
you can
either.
leave it the way it is and give that principal the autonomy to do what they need to do within their own building.
Well, right.
And
No,
if
I
they can
agree.
justify it, I highly doubt the board's going to say no.
Right.
Yeah, I kind of go back to that value statement, because I agree with Catherine. And I think that you might not have an opportunity to do a reassignment, because you may not have 3 classes of 17 in 5th grade, where you can just go, oh, we can combine these and it's not a big deal and we'll reassign to 3rd grade to address it. It may require an additional hire, or it may require something that wasn't in a formula because you have a high population of special needs at a specific grade level. And so I think even just adding a similar value statement like what we're talking about with the AP, to say that kids aren't numbers, that there's, looking at the composition of grade levels in buildings is important to address how many teachers are assigned to that place, and so that there is a mechanism for you to not be stuck with these as finite rules, but create an opportunity to add additional staffing to address that, so that the resources follow the need.
This is my last thought, and then I think we're all fading. But maybe in this top sentence up here, maybe even number 5, it could be, this is a little bit of a philosophy.
Yeah, that's where it's what Catherine just
Right,
said.
but maybe even number 5 goes up there as well. I don't know.
Or maybe
Maybe
number 5 by that
5
one
goes it.
specifically.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Any further comment at this time?
We didn't task you with anything, John.
It is 9:15. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I'm not that yet, so.
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
Second.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.
Do you notice how we didn't even make the policy committee get tasked?
All right.